और जैसा कि हमारे आज आपको शायद जानकारी होगी थ्रू द व्हाट्सएप, अदरवाइज एक इंटरनेशनल आरआरसी हमारी इस समय 2 तारीख से 7 तारीख तक की थी, जिसकी वजह से हमारे जो चेयरमैन सर है अतुल मेहरोत्रा जी, वो इस वीसीएम को ज्वाइन नहीं कर पाए अभी तक, और साथ ही साथ सेक्रेटरी साहब भी, क्योंकि दोनों आरआरसी में गए हुए हैं, तो थोड़ा सा उनकी फ्लाइट थोड़ा सा लेट है, अदरवाइज वो ज्वाइन करते जरूर। और हमारे डायनेमिक लीडर जो साथ में हमारे अंकित सोमानी जी, हमारे आरसीएम साहब फ्रॉम द अजमेर एंड किशनगढ़ ब्रांच, तो अंकित जी का भी स्वागत है, वेलकम है अपनी खुद की वेबिनार में वीसीएम में। तो थोड़ा सा टेक्निकल इशू है, अंकित जी अभी ज्वाइन करेंगे बहुत जल्दी। अच्छा, हमारे साथ हमारे स्पीकर आज के जो बड़ा यूनिक टॉपिक है जीएसटी का, तो उम्मीद करूंगा कि जीएसटी को लेके खासतौर से जो गुड़गांव से जो एक तरीके से मुहिम चली और काफी लोगों ने उसे ज्वाइन किया, डिफरेंट ब्रांचेस में डिफरेंट मेंबर्स ने, तो सर उनको भी ध्यान में रख के जरा जो हमारे कंट्रोवर्शियल इश्यूज आ रहे हैं, नॉट ओनली द नोटिस और अदरवाइज, तो जो एटीट्यूड ऑफ द डिपार्टमेंट है, तो मैं चाहूंगा यश जी अपने डेलिब्रेशन में उसे भी कहीं ना कहीं शामिल करें। तो मैं वेलकम करता हूं हमारे आज के स्पीकर जयपुर से यश जी का, और मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा सनी अग्रवाल जी से मेरठ से कि एक बार जरा बिफोर कि इससे पहले कि हम सर को इनवाइट करें फॉर देयर डेलिब्रेशन, कुछ मेंबर और भी जुड़ जाएंगे, तो मैं चाहूंगा कि सनी जी जरा एक छोटा सा सर का एक ब्रीफ जो बायोडाटा है वो जरा पढ़ के सुनाए सर।
Thank you, Rajiv sir. Thank you so much, Rajiv sir, and welcome Yash Dadda ji. Mr. Yash Dadda ji is a fellow member of ICI. He is associated with Dadda and Company as partner indirect taxes. He is having experience of over 11 years in the field of indirect taxes with concentration only on GST, service tax and excise matters. He is currently engaged in handling litigation along with advising clients, structuring transactions, and conducting due diligence in given fields of taxation. He has represented ICI in Regional Advisory Committee Rajasthan under aegis of Chief Commissioner of Income Tax, Excise and Customs. He is funding core member of study group of ICI on GST research and upgradation matters. Yasji has deep interest in academic discussions, upgradations, and training. He has written handbooks on principles of classifications of goods and services under GST and also on casual taxable person on IDTC of ICI. Yasji is a commerce graduate from Commerce College, Rajasthan University, Jaipur, and certificate holder of IDT course conducted by ICI. Over to Yasji.
थैंक यू सो मच सनी जी। हम स्टार्ट कर सकते हैं राजीव जी?
हाँ जी सर, बिल्कुल कीजिए सर। अब मेरे बाकी एक बार मेंबर से एक अनुरोध रहेगा कि जो भी उनके क्वेश्चन आंसर है तो क्वेश्चन आंसर बॉक्स में भी डाल सकते हैं, या जब हमारे स्पीकर साहब अलाउ करेंगे तो हैंड रेज करेंगे तो उनको उसी तरीके से हम जब कहेंगे हमारे स्पीकर साहब तो ले लिया जाएगा। और मैं चाहूंगा कि जब तक अंकित जी का थोड़ा सा स्पीकर प्रॉब्लम कर रहा है तो सनी भाई जरा आप जरा मॉडरेटर की भूमिका जरा निभाए, ये आपसे रिक्वेस्ट रहेगी हमारी। तो ओवर टू यस जी, प्लीज कंटिन्यू।
थैंक यू सो मच राजीव जी। Respected office bearers of CIRC, dear Rajiv Gupta ji, my dear friend Ankit Somani ji, moderator Sunny Agarwal ji, in absentia the chairman and the secretary of the region, and all the members of CIRC and anybody else who's outside the region and joining this through virtual mode. First of all, I would like to thank CIRC for giving me this wonderful opportunity to share my views on this topic, which Rajiv rightly pointed out that it looks like a very interesting topic, recent controversies and legal provisions behind it. And jab Ankit ji se baat hui and Ankit ji called me that we want to keep this session. So when we were discussing what should we keep, so then we mutually both of us decided, let's try and not restrict ourselves to one specific topic, but let's try and look around what are those things which have happened in GST recently, maybe in last 4 to 5 months to 6 months. What are the things which probably revenue has started taking up under GST, and what is the way forward which all of us as professionals we have in terms of giving value addition to the clients. So around that topic, probably we'll have discussion for next 1.5 to 2 hours. आप सबसे request करूँगा that whatever questions you have, you may put that in the chat box. If I find that we are able to link it to the topic, I'll take it then and there. Otherwise, we'll keep it at the end of the session. Okay. So I hope all of you are able to see my screen. Whenever I generally start, I can hear. Yes. I think Ankit ji, you have. आपको I think आप बोल सकते हैं आप?
Yes, yes, perfectly.
Okay. ठीक है. Yeah. So whenever I generally start, I start with one permanent slide which I have, and I always start with by saying that whatever loading you see on my first slide is not a problem which my presentation or my computer has, but that is the state of GST which we have currently in India. In fact, I was looking at CIRC website and I got to know that you have a topic tomorrow that is 5 years of GST, and some speaker would be taking that topic. एंड इफ यू लुक इट फ्रॉम दैट पर्सपेक्टिव, तो पिछले 5 सालों के अंदर ये लॉ का जो एक्साइटमेंट था, एटलीस्ट टैक्स प्रोफेशनल्स के अंदर, दैट एक्साइटमेंट हैज ग्रोन मल्टीफोल्ड, एंड लॉट ऑफ पीपल हु आर इनटू जॉब, in fact they have came back to practice, and one of the reasons which has brought them to practice is GST. That is, in terms of all of us, at least who are in this age bracket of from 25 to 40, they thought of that this is probably the right time to come back, look at it, whether they can set up their own practice, and this law would help them, because this is a law which is new, and people who are senior, who are junior, probably it is just a matter of interpretation. Having said that, the way it has been implemented, at least in India in last 5 years, if you look at it from the perspective of bureaucracy and you look at it from the perspective of GST portal, you realize कि कुछ gaps तो है implementation के अंदर. Maybe the intention looks to be absolutely all right, but the implementation or the manner in which it is being looked at from the revenue side is not what was the objective behind GST. And day in, day out, when we see notices of input tax credit and restrictions on input tax credit, day in, day out, when we look at refund is not being allowed for a very petty or a small reason, and specifically the issue which I think Treasurer Saab raised rightly regarding that arrest of our fellow members at Gurgaon, you realize that there is something which is at the revenue side, there is a bias which they have in mind. And bias is, it can be two ways. One is towards the taxpayer, how they look at the taxpayer, and what is the perception which government or at least the department has towards the taxpayer. And second is probably because this law is new, so that they would like to challenge everything which has been probably settled in the older laws. Or when things like this happen, obviously, if you look at from the businessman's perspective, he would always say this is not ease of doing things. But when you look at it from a tax professional's perspective, you would realize that probably this is that time where somebody who is qualitatively investing himself or herself in the practice, they would be able to actually achieve the objective. Now, in this background, I think जो मुझे बोला गया कि looking at what has happened in Gurgaon and to share our views, I would not go into detail of it. But I think one learning which all of us have from whatever has happened is, and this is something which comes from our friends who are into a practice of auditing, who understand what is the value of documentation and all our auditing standards which are there. Because at the end of the day, when we are giving a certification under any fiscal law, we are supposed to have proper working for it. And we need to know specifically for what basically we are giving the certification. So understanding of law is one thing, but along with understanding of the law, the proper documentation which you have, the backing for it, and what are the safeguards which you have kept for yourself. I think these three things which I can always say is important from a professional's perspective, irrespective what department thinks of, irrespective what is their approach. I think our personal our personal security, our professional way of doing things is very much dependent upon how are we keeping our documents. So I think I'll start with that phrase. Now, recent controversies. So I think इसके अंदर कोई लिमिट नहीं है कि क्या कंट्रोवर्सीज है. यू पिक अ टॉपिक एंड you'll be able to realize that every topic, every section, maybe every subsection, you'll be able to find out some interpretation or the other which would probably give which would open floodgates of litigation. And then you have to take a call ki where do you stand with the client. You stand at a very conservative side, you stand at a side where you want to look at a moderate compliance, or you stand at a side where you want to basically take the department one-on-one and want to basically challenge their challenge to a settled principle. And I think in this regard, we will look at various aspects which have developed, and we'll see to it what is the position today. So let's pick two topics from reverse charge. What has happened recently, matters which have went to the court, what is the outcome of those matters, and how it is applicable upon us. तो अगर पहली चीज की बात करें, and I'm sure हम सब लोगों ने इसको one much celebrated judgment, the judgment to which all of us were looking for since last 2-3 years, ever since हमें पता चला कि Gujarat High Court has given a verdict where they have said that the levy of GST on ocean freight on CIF imports is ultra virus to the provisions of the act, and one is not required to pay that. And ever since that judgment came in, all of us, at least who were first of all not sure what is this levy about, पहले हमने उस levy के बारे में समझा. Some of us were already complying to it, and we thought because it is a judgment by one of the high courts in India, it may not have a pan-India applicability. So let's continue paying it. For all those who are not paying the tax, because they were not able to claim the credit, they always said that Gujarat High Court judgment is a binding judgment and they would follow it. Department took this to the Supreme Court. Department challenged the judgment, and finally Supreme Court came out with the verdict. The manner in which the verdict came out and manner it was all over the news. उसमें जो मेन चीज के ऊपर जो प्रेयर था या जो इशू था उसको तो उतना लाइमलाइट या ग्लैमर नहीं मिला. But that main issue which flashed in everybody's mind is that recommendations of GST Council are not binding on the state, and then somehow every discussion turned around by saying, okay, what is the role of GST Council? Are they recommendatory, non-recommendatory? What are now states going to do? And around those things. Our topic will not be on that. Our topic will be on the specific issue, whether there is a liability to pay tax under reverse charge in respect of transactions where somebody who is sitting in India, who is an importer, importing goods on CIF basis, और उसके ऊपर अगर उसको रिवर्स चार्ज में उसने टैक्स पे किया हुआ है, तो अब इस जजमेंट के बाद क्या इंप्लीकेशन है, उसको आगे पे करने की जरूरत है क्या, and can he claim the refund? So before we go into that, a little background which is important. What was the issue in hand? As I said, issue in hand was there was an exporter sitting outside India. उसने एक फॉरेन शिपिंग लाइन को एंगेज करा, who was also sitting outside India. There was an importer sitting in India. An importer who was sitting in India, he wanted to import goods from the exporter sitting outside India. He asked for a rate, and the exporter sitting outside India said, I'll give you a CIF lump sum rate, and the goods will be delivered to your place, and there'll be a lump sum price for it. So it had a price for goods, it had a price for transportation through sea also. Because when we import goods, we pay customs duty. So the importer who was sitting in India was paying basic custom duty along with IGST when goods were crossing the custom barriers. But all of us know we have a notification of reverse charge under CGST and IGST. And there was a specific entry in notification under IGST, that is notification 10/2017. And there was an entry number 10. जहां पर ये बोला गया कि if somebody is importing goods into India, he shall be deemed to be the recipient of a service. That service which has been given by the foreign shipping line outside India to the exporter sitting outside India. So two parties sitting outside India doing a transaction within themselves, but because the benefit of that is coming to the person sitting in India who is an importer, usko reverse charge mein tax pay karne ki zarurat hai. And mind you, this provision was always there in a sense that this entry number 10 was always there in notification 10/2017 ever since from 1st July 2017. All of us disputed that. It looked like that it is not logical because वो दो लोग जो इंडिया के बाहर बैठे ट्रांजेक्शन कर रहे हैं उसकी टैक्स लाइबिलिटी why somebody has to pay sitting in India. Gujarat High Court gave a favorable judgment and they said it is an extraterritorial jurisdiction which department or basically which lawmakers are trying to encroach upon, and hence उन्होंने बोला this levy is ultra virus. I'm sure all of us who practice in law, they understand this, that when somebody is being treated as ultra virus or called as ultra virus by any of the courts, that means it is beyond the legislative competence, or because it is beyond the legislative competence, it has no say at all ever since it was there. And on that basis, all of us had an understanding that this levy cannot sustain. Matter went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court ke andar, there are 3-4 things which Supreme Court has observed. So apart from the judgment, all of us know judgment which they have said is yes, tax is not payable under reverse charge. But I think वो conclusion के अलावा 3 चीजें हैं इसके अंदर which is very interesting. First, Supreme Court has not said that the levy is ultra virus. So that's point number 1. That means Gujarat High Court ने ये बोल के बोला था कि reverse charge में tax नहीं लगेगा. They said the levy is ultra virus beyond their legislative competence. Supreme Court has not said this. In fact, Supreme Court ने 2 चीजों को analyze करा. उन्होंने सबसे पहले recipient की definition को analyze करा जो section 2 section 93 जो CGST Act है उसके अंदर दी हुई है, to which we will come to in a while, which is a very interesting interpretation. Second, the discussed कि supply के अंदर 3 factors important है. That is, there has to be an activity, there has to be another person, and there has to be consideration. They said there is absolutely no problem treating importer sitting in India as a recipient. So transaction 2 लोग जो इंडिया के बाहर बैठे हैं उनके बीच में execute हो रहा है. Payment is being made by a person sitting outside India to a foreign shipping line sitting outside India. Still, the recipient of service is going to be the person sitting in India. So that was the first. That was one of the grounds which the petitioner on behalf of Mohit Mittal's the advocates raised. But the Supreme Court said no, nothing doing. They will be treated as a recipient here. Second issue was what is the valuation here, whether there is a consideration at all or not. And Supreme Court said कि जब 2 लोग भारत के बाहर बैठे और वो पैसा pay कर रहे हैं, what is going to be the value for it? It is as good as consideration in a specific supply, and hence there is presence of consideration. The Supreme Court said there is a supply, but Supreme Court said there is one problem in the manner in which the entry is there. We have a concept of composite supply, and the composite supply says 2 or more supplies which are naturally bundled, और उसमें से one supply is a principal supply. And they said there is an example in the composite supply which is specifically given in the definition. And that example is, agar मैं कोई goods, I am selling my goods to another person, and I am also taking charges for freight and insurance. Then in that case, freight, insurance, and value of goods, all 3 of them together, they may be independent supplies. But by virtue of the definition of composite supply, this becomes a composite supply, और उसमें हम principal supply identify करेंगे, which is predominant supply, and that is going to be the sale of goods. On that same principle, Supreme Court said exactly in this case, in case of CIF imports, it qualifies as a composite supply, principal supply being the supply of goods. And because it is principal supply of goods, in that case, taxability has to be what is applicable on that supply of goods, that is import of goods. And because on import of goods, customs duty is payable, which importer is any which way paying, there cannot be a separate charge of reverse charge in the service component, which is part of that composite supply. And that is why no reverse charge shall be payable on that ocean freight on a deemed value. And that was the verdict of Supreme Court. And that's why they said there is going to be no tax, but entry is not ultra virus. Now, what does that mean? It means 2-3 things, which is very important. If they are saying that this entry is not ultra virus, they refer to the definition of recipient in 293. And I'm sure आप सब लोगों ने definition पढ़ी होगी, but इस definition को वापस पढ़ना अब सुप्रीम कोर्ट के जजमेंट के बाद में थोड़ा relevant है. कैसे सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कहा कि इंडिया में बैठा हुआ जो इंपोर्टर है वो बिकॉज इस ट्रांजैक्शन का बेनिफिशियरी है, क्योंकि गुड्स उसके पास में आ रहे हैं, दैट इज व्हाई ही इज ट्रीटेड एज अ रिसिपिएंट ऑफ सर्विस. They said, you look at the definition of recipient, it has 3 clauses. 1, when a consideration is payable, then person who is paying the consideration. Second, when consideration is not payable, then somebody who is in possession of goods. And when consideration is payable for when no consideration is payable for supply of a service, then to whom service is rendered. Then Supreme Court said, you read after that, which is important. And it says, and any reference to a person to whom supply is made shall be constructed as a reference to the recipient of supply and shall include an agent. So abhi shall include wala kya aage wala part is not relevant for us, but yahan tak ka part is very important. So they said, whenever you're talking to a reference to a person to whom supply is constructed, that is a reference to the recipient of supply. Now in this case, Supreme Court said, let's go to the place of supply provisions. Or place of supply mein wherever there is a transportation of goods happening between a person sitting outside India and person sitting in India, then in that case, the destination of goods is the place of supply. Supreme Court read these 2 things together, और उन्होंने बोला the place of supply is because India, and in India the importer is sitting, And because we have a definition of recipient, and definition of recipient says any reference to a person to whom supply is made shall be constructed as a reference to the recipient of supply. That is why that importer sitting in India becomes the recipient in this case. Now, if we extrapolate that analogy, which probably was never the intention, or it looks like the manner in this judgment is written, this is not the only basis on the basis of which the judgment revolves around. But if you take this further, this unsettles a lot of things. It's unsettled a lot of things in a sense to say, up till now, all of us have understood that person who is making the payment for a supply is the recipient. But once Supreme Court has said you can't just read that in isolation, you can also treat that if there is some another beneficiary that can also be treated as a recipient, that brings a lot of floodgates. Tomorrow, can there be an argument by saying there can be two recipients in a supply? Can there be a said that now only making a payment is not the criteria to identify that it is going to be the recipient for that particular supply? Probably, ये time आगे जाके हमको बताएगा whether that kind of interpretation can be taken or not. But it looks like what Supreme Court has tried to explain is that in case of a contract where you have a clear, where you have a person clearly identified as a beneficiary, अगर लॉ मेकर चाहें कि उसको फ्रॉम अ डीमिंग फिक्शन उसको रिसिपिएंट बनाना चाहते हैं, and if let's say they want to levy a tax liability in that case under reverse charge or otherwise, lawmakers are competent to do so. They are not incompetent. It is not something which is beyond their legislative capacity. And यहाँ पे डिफरेंस है गुजरात हाई कोर्ट और सुप्रीम कोर्ट के जजमेंट के अंदर. ये बताना इसीलिए जरूरी है because this will determine the future courts for all those people who are affected by this transaction. And who are all those affected? All those people who are importing goods from outside India, all of them are affected. Why are they affected? वो सभी लोग जिन्होंने पुराने पीरियड्स में टैक्स पे नहीं किया है, क्या उन्हें टैक्स पे करने की जरूरत है? Good news is now they are not required to pay the tax because this is judgment by the Honorable Supreme Court. And any judgment given by the Honorable Supreme Court, it has a binding precedential value across India. क्या हमको आगे टैक्स पे करने की जरूरत है because that entry still there in the statute book? The answer is absolutely no. Even if that entry is there in the notification, still one is not required to pay the tax unless there is an amendment which is probably futuristic in nature. If somebody has already paid the tax and claimed the credit, now is he required to give back the credit to the government because Supreme Court has said there was no liability to pay tax? One possible offshoot from this judgment can be tomorrow department will start issuing notices to everybody by saying that all those who have taken input tax credit of tax paid under RCM, now that credit claim is incorrect because Supreme Court has said tax was not. So it becomes a double whammy for them. उनके लिए एक तरीके से उन्हें tax भी pay करा और अब government may come back by saying this judgment that you are not entitled for the ITC. In this regard, we have a lot of judgments. Like one judgment is there from Delhi Tribunal that is specifically in respect of reverse charge, H1 India Private Limited, service tax regime judgment, but almost on same principles that even if I was not liable to pay any tax under reverse charge, I have paid that under a bona fide belief, then I am entitled to the SENVAT credit. Same principles we can bring here, and I think we have a very good case to argue कि अगर मैंने input tax credit लिया हुआ भी है तो भी वो मुझसे वापस नहीं लिया जा सकता. If somebody has already paid the tax, not claim the credit, can he claim the refund? The answer is yes. They can go ahead and claim the refund now under the category of excess payment of tax because tax was now not payable. That's what Supreme Court has said. However, that application will be filed under Section 54 for refund, and there is a time limit under Section 54 that is 2 years from the date of payment of tax. So that does not mean कि 2 साल से जो पुराने taxes जो लोगों ने pay कर रखे हैं, that is beyond 2020 or before 2020, they can claim refund. Unfortunately, the answer is no for them because again, I am repeating, this is not a levy which has been held as ultra virus. So they would not be able to claim refund in this regard. But maybe after June 2020, all those who have paid the tax and the reverse charge, they would be able to claim the refund. If let's say in departmental audit, somebody has paid interest along with tax, can they claim a refund of that interest? The answer is absolutely yes. If somebody has paid penalty, they can also claim refund of that penalty. But again, it has to be within 2 years. They should have paid that in last 2 years, then only they'll be able to claim that refund of interest or penalty. What will happen to the service tax litigation? So all of us know कि service tax के अंदर भी ये entry थी April 2017 से लेके June 2017 तक. And वहां पे भी there is a high court judgment from Gujarat in case of Sal Steel. So it was not Mohit Minerals, but it was in another case as Sal Steel. Will this judgment be binding in respect of service tax matters also? Well, to tell you, this judgment has been only delivered in the context of GST matters now, not in the matters of service tax. So that judgment is still pending before the Honorable Supreme Court. One may take an argument because it has been held as not payable under GST on the principles of composite supply. Similar kind of provision was there under service tax under section 66F, but that may not have a binding precedential value. So अभी तक उसके ऊपर Supreme Court का कोई final verdict नहीं है. Last, which is very interesting, what will happen to the FOB contracts now? So this judgment is specifically on a fact sheet when there we have a CIF contract. What will happen if somebody is importing on a FOB basis or जहां पर shipping charges are separately identified? Can it be because वहां पे one argument can be taken that this is not a composite supply, and because Supreme Court has said the levy is not ultra virus, तो क्या उसके ऊपर tax reverse charge में लग सकता है? Possible that door is still open. उसके ऊपर अभी तक कोई जवाब नहीं है Supreme Court का, because Supreme Court ने specific fact sheet के ऊपर judgment दिया हुआ है. So that argument is still open. Having said that, in respect of this ocean freight, because now जिन्होंने tax pay किया है, they also have certain decisions to take in future. All those who have not paid the tax, probably they are free right now, and all those who have not claimed the credit, for them basically they can go ahead and claim the refund in this regard. Second issue, which is very interesting and which has been raised by department through audits or maybe anti-evasion proceedings, is there a liability to pay tax under reverse charge by the companies in respect of the personal guarantees which have been given by the directors to the banks for the purpose of taking fundings from the financial institutions by these companies? So what are the general facts generally in this case? This is one of the easiest things to find out, to be able to discover by the department. What they have to only do is, जो भी कोई भी private limited or public limited or a listed company is there, they have to just take the financial statement, go to that a specific point regarding secured loans, read the notes to account, and from notes to account they're able to find out whether this loan is backed by a personal guarantee from a director or not. Once they are able to read it, there are some assumptions which basically, or there is some understanding which the revenue has developed in last 1 year or so. What is the understanding? The understanding is, because director and company are related parties, director is giving a personal guarantee to the bank that if whatever loan is being given to the company, if tomorrow there is any default, they are standing behind as a guarantor and they would basically fill in for whatever gap, if any, which is there. Now, all of us know on a fact basis that there is no guarantee commission which is being paid to all these directors. There is a specific clause in the loan agreement. Loan agreement में एक specific बात होती है इस चीज को लेके कि कोई guarantee commission का payment director को नहीं किया जाए. Director जो guarantee दे रहा है, he may be a promoter director, he may not be a promoter director, he may be employee of the company, he may not be employee of the company, but if he's an executive director, MD, generally, they are being asked by all these financial institutions to back the loan through their guarantee. Department is saying, and what the interesting interpretation which they are bringing in is, because related and because the company and directors are related party, one. Second, reverse charge का जो notification उसमें specifically लिखा हुआ है, services given by director of the company are liable to tax under reverse charge. Third, they are saying there is one schedule 1 under section 7, which determines transaction between related parties without consideration is also a supply. So even if there is no consideration, director को कोई guarantee commission का payment नहीं हो रहा, फिर भी हम ये मानेंगे कि taxable supply है, और इसकी value हम valuation rules में किसी तरीके से identify करेंगे, and on that we will ask the company to pay tax under reverse charge basis. And that's how basically all, at least CGST side, in case of all the audits, they are raising this point. In some cases, the anti-evasion proceedings, basically they're raising the issue. Interestingly, somebody would say, इसकी value कैसे identify करते हैं? So what revenue is doing is, revenue is following the residual method. What they do is, they write a letter to the bank and they ask the bank कि अगर आपको कंपनी को ये लोन देना होता और आपसे गारंटी मांगी जाती है तो आप क्या गारंटी कमीशन चार्ज करते हैं? And generally banks gives a letter by saying generally their market rate of charging the guarantee commission is from 4% to 7%. And that is our department is saying, so that's the market rate, 4% or 7% of the exposure. So if let's say there is a loan of 10 crore rupees, 7% of it, that is approximately 70 lakh rupees. Against that 70 lakh rupees, there is liability to pay tax at the rate of 18%. And that's how department is raising the issue. Now, 2-3 things probably I think which all of us have to understand before really replying to the department is, which probably department is assuming in itself, that is, first of all, who is a service provider and service recipient? So as per the department's understanding, service provider is the director, service recipient is the company. Now we know under GST, there is a supply which is a taxable supply only when there is an activity for a consideration in course and furtherance of business. So there is first aspect to be checked कि जो डायरेक्टर ने कंपनी को अगर कोई पर्सनल गारंटी दी भी है, इज इट एन एक्टिविटी इन कोर्स एंड फर्दरेंस ऑफ द डायरेक्टर? माइंड यू, ये कंपनी के इन कोर्स एंड फर्दरेंस ऑफ बिजनेस में उससे कोई रिलेशनशिप नहीं है इसकी टैक्सेबिलिटी का जीएसटी के अंदर, क्योंकि फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल अ ट्रांजैक्शन हैज टू बी टैक्सेबल, then only it has to be determined who is liable to pay tax and the reverse charge, and whether the transaction is taxable, वो सप्लाई का जो बेसिक स्कोप है उसके सारे कॉर्नर्स को चेक करता है या नहीं करता है, उसके लिए इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट टू आइडेंटिफाई फ्रॉम द सप्लायर्स पर्सपेक्टिव. So the supplier is director, whether it falls in course and furtherance of the business of the director or not. That is first thing to check. Second, are they really related parties, whether company and director are related party or not. And third, if director is the employee of the company, is it not an activity in course and furtherance of the employment of that director to the company, which is covered in Schedule 3. Now, in this regard, as I've already explained, Schedule 1 के अंदर there is specific entry, supply goods and services between related person, और एक Schedule 3 के अंदर एंट्री है जो बताता है किन ट्रांजेक्शन को ना हम सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स मानेंगे और ना सप्लाई ऑफ सर्विस मानेंगे. And answer to that comes from a service by an employee to employer in course and in course or in relation to his employment. But I think before that, two things to understand: whether director and company are related parties. Because Schedule 1 में तभी जाएगा जब वो related parties है. Clearly वो दोनों distinct person नहीं है because they do not have a common parent. Are they related parties? When you look at the definition of related party, which is given under explanation to section 15, you realize तीन possible clauses हैं जिसके अंदर probably it may fall. That is, such person are employer and employee, such person directly or indirectly owns and controls 25% or more of the outstanding stock, or one of them directly or indirectly controls the other. And you realize relationship of director, one person as a director of the company is not covered in explanation to section 15 under the definition of related party. He may be a promoter. So if let's say I am a promoter in a company and I'm also a director, उस कंपनी का I am a related person by virtue of that I am promoter of the company or a shareholder having certain percentage of stock. But I can't be a related party of that company just because I'm the director, because that is not envisaged in the definition of related party. So having said that, if let's say even if I am the employee of the company as a director, or let's say I am the shareholder of the company as a director also, I am not related party in the capacity of a director. And once that happens, there cannot be any reverse charge. There cannot be levy under reverse charge because services by director to a company are under reverse charge. Even if I am a director, whatever I am doing of giving a personal guarantee, it is not covered in Schedule 1. Schedule 1 में इसलिए covered नहीं है क्योंकि यहाँ पर activities without consideration are only covered in respect of related party. One person can be a related party in dual capacity also. He can be an employee, he can be a promoter. But if he is a director, any activity done as a director, that is not covered by Schedule 1, at least in this case. So that is a very strong argument to take. Whether this activity can be covered as in course and furtherance of business of the director, when you read the clauses of business, 4 possible clauses where it can fall: A, B, C, and G. And A, B, C are generic clauses, that is somebody is undertaking trade, commerce, manufacture, profession, vocation. So all those cases where director is not a professional, to my understanding, I believe we have a very strong case to say that director has not undertaken any activity in a professional capacity to give the guarantee, and that is why this is not an activity in course of the business. Somebody may argue it may fall under clause G. What is clause G? Services supplied by a person as the holder of an office which has been accepted by him in course and furtherance of his trade, profession, or vocation. So because I'm holder of the office of a director, and bank has specifically told me that because you are the director, you are required to basically give this amount, can it be said to be covered in G? Again, just because I'm holder of the office, that does not mean it is covered by the definition of business, because it is followed by the words which says accepted by him in course and furtherance of his trade, profession, and vocation. So again, till the time the director is not a professional, because it can't be activity in the trade of the director. Director generally does not give this guarantee to anybody else on a professional basis or as a business activity, and that is why it may not get covered into business. So I think on these two aspects, we have a very strong case again to tell the department that it is not an activity undertaken by a related party. Second, it is not an activity in course of the business of the director. Third argument, which is there, I think, which is the easiest and the convenient argument. In fact, a chartered accountant's thought process. If let's say director is the employee of the company और उसको director's remuneration का payment होता है, why not to have an employment agreement and write that all the activities which you will do as a director of the company shall be part and parcel of this employment agreement. And once you write this, that means giving personal guarantee will also be an activity as part and parcel of the employment agreement. And any activity done by an employee to the employer in course of his employment, it is covered by Schedule 3, which is neither a supply of goods nor a supply of service. So there's a small change in the employment agreement wherever somebody is being paid director's remuneration as an employee, and it goes out of the tax net also. One more important thing which probably department is not looking at in all these cases is that there is a specific RBI circular. RBI circular dated 2009, which specifically puts a bar that whenever a director gives a guarantee to a company, the company basically cannot give certain percentage of that amount back to the director in the name of a guarantee commission. That is not allowed. So interestingly, that argument of department also fails because in this case, there cannot be consideration at all. There is no possibility. So Schedule 1 में वो transaction cover होते हैं जिनमें consideration हो सकता है, but because relationship के कारण consideration नहीं होता, इसीलिए they are covered in Schedule 1. Probably in this case, there is a specific restriction under RBI that there can't be a consideration. That is why the taxability does not arise. So I think in all these cases, there is a very good point for argument by the assessee before the department by saying that there is no tax liability on this personal guarantee given by the director to the company, and the question of reverse charge does not arise. With these two topics of reverse charge, I think let's come to the another very interesting judgment which has come in respect of builders. I'm sure आप सबने इसके बारे में पढ़ा होगा, चर्चा करी होगी. But again, what are the nuances and how it helps as a tax professional like us, rather than reading the headline in the newspaper that in respect of construction services, the Honorable Supreme Court has said that there is going to be no liability of GST on the land, which generally all of us understand. But judgment in one line probably can be said like this. But what are the bases on which Supreme Court has said this, or what are the possible advices which one can give to the client? I think that is quite interesting to understand. So we have a judgment from Honorable Gujarat High Court in respect of this Munjal Manish Bhai Bhatt, where the facts were that there was this person who approached a builder, and basically the contract was that he wanted to get a bungalow constructed. There was a plot of land, or plot of land के ऊपर he wanted to get a bungalow constructed. There was an agreement. उस agreement के अंदर जो land की value है और construction की value है, that was separately identified. So that is one very important fact to understand, that the value of land was clearly available in the agreement, and the construction cost or construction price, which was required to pay to the supplier, was also there. We know that there is a tax liability to pay tax in respect of construction services if the consideration or a part consideration is received before completion certificate. So there is a tax liability. But the problem is the notification which talks about the rate which is applicable on construction services, it has a condition in respect of valuation, and it says that whatever total amount you're receiving, you have to first include the value of land into it, and after including the value of land, उसमें से आपको 1/3 का deduction देने की जरूरत है. So notification is silent कि अगर हमारे पास value of land separately available है तो क्या हम उसका deduction ले सकते हैं. Notification says in all the cases, pan India basis, universal concept is you are only entitled to take 1/3 deduction, and you do not have to really consider what is the actual value of the land. By this, against this, basically, they went to the Gujarat High Court and they said, ये valuation का जो तरीका है, it is again ultra virus, it should be struck down. Petitioner, their argument was a very simple argument that there is no mechanism available that if I have the actual value of land available, तो आप उसका मुझे deduction दे सकते हैं. And this 1/3 deeming fiction, it is ultra virus to the provisions of the Act. What did Supreme Court say? Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. What did the High Court say? Two very interesting things which High Court said. High Court said GST is applicable on the value which is mentioned under Section 15. और ये Section 9 जो लेवी वाला section है वो Section 15 का reference देता है. When you read Section 15, Section 15(1), to which it starts with, it says tax is payable on price actually paid or payable. So first thing to understand is जो GST applicable है वो price actually paid और payable पे है. लैंड के ऊपर टैक्स लगाने का इंटेंशन कभी भी नहीं है, ना लॉ मेकर्स का है, ना लॉ के अंदर लिखा है, और ना डिपार्टमेंट इस चीज के ऊपर आमादा है कि वो लैंड के ऊपर टैक्स लगाना चाहते हैं, एटलीस्ट इन फैक्ट्स के अंदर. एंड हेंस दे सेड कि इन दैट केस जब प्राइस एक्चुअली पेड और पेबल के ऊपर टैक्स है, लैंड के ऊपर टैक्स नहीं है, तो कंसेप्चुअली जो कंस्ट्रक्शन की प्राइस एक्चुअली पेड और पेबल है उसी के ऊपर टैक्स लगना चाहिए. Now when that value is not available and the notification says आप 1/3 का डिडक्शन ले लीजिए और एक्चुअल वैल्यू ऑफ लैंड को कंसीडर नहीं करते हैं, that is clearly beyond the statutory scheme which is there under section 15. वो section 15(1) का जो concept है उसके beyond जाता है, and that is why it is ultra virus. Second thing which this judgment says is very important. Judgment says होना क्या चाहिए, if there is actual value of land available, take that deduction. If the actual value of land is not available, no problem, go back to the valuation rules. Because अगर किसी चीज की वैल्यू आइडेंटिफाई करनी है और वैल्यू आप सेक्शन 15(1) के हिसाब से नहीं निकाल सकते, तो नोटिफिकेशन सिर्फ ये बता सकता है कि कौन सी ट्रांजेक्शन ऐसे हैं जिसकी वैल्यू नॉर्मली नहीं निकल सकती, और उसके लिए आपको वैल्यूएशन रूल्स रेफर करने की जरूरत है. बट नोटिफिकेशन में अपने आप में 1/3 का डिडक्शन देना इज इनकरेक्ट. And that's what the provision says. The provision says go back to the valuation rules, rule 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. Look at your case, find out कि आप कौन से rule में fall करते हैं, and accordingly take the benefit. And hence that is why this judgment becomes, it looks a very balanced judgment, and that's why it says, it never says कि land की value पे tax नहीं लग सकता, इसलिए पूरी construction service के ऊपर कोई GST की liability नहीं आ सकती. The judgment says either give a deduction of the actual value of land or basically go back to the valuation rules. और valuation rules में देखिए कि क्या आप cost of provision of service identify कर सकते हैं, या open market value निकाल सकते हैं, या like kind and quality की value निकाल सकते हैं, या फिर is there any residual method available. And I think on this basis we all of us can go back and look at the service tax provisions which were there before this GST, where similar sort of challenge was there before the Delhi High Court in case of Suresh Kumar Bansal. And almost on similar line, the honorable Delhi High Court said कि अगर आप actual value को deduction देने के लिए possible नहीं है आपको, then in that case there cannot be any service tax liability on construction services. Similarly, Gujarat High Court has given a verdict. What is the implication of this? जैसा हमारे पास में मोहित मंडल सुप्रीम कोर्ट का जजमेंट था जिसका पैन इंडिया implication है, and nobody in India today is liable to pay tax under reverse charge in ocean freight. Can we take a similar view in respect of this judgment? We have to look at it. What are the basically how High Court judgment is different from a Supreme Court judgment. So first of all, what this High Court judgment is telling and what is the implication? Implication is if you have a value of land available, actual value of land in that particular transaction, उसका आप deduction ले लीजिए total value में से, balance के ऊपर you pay tax at the applicable rate. If value of land is not available, go to the valuation rules. When you go to the valuation rules के हिसाब से identify करिए कि आप कैसे construction की service की value निकाल सकते हैं. Now, whether you have to give a deduction of the value of land as per the DLC method, as per any other method, or whatever the means available, or you have to find out the value of construction as per cost of construction plus 10%, that will depend upon case-to-case basis. Third, whether this judgment can be applied on pan-India basis, so that's a very interesting question. One logical view is because it is a judgment by Gujarat High Court, it has a binding value at least only in case of Gujarat, but not across India. But again, this judgment has held that provisions in respect of valuation for this land, it is ultra vires to the scheme. Now we have a Supreme Court judgment in respect of Kusum ingots, which says that any law which has been held by Gujarat, any High Court as ultra vires, and if there is no contrary judgment, अगर उसका कोई contrary judgment नहीं है, और अगर किसी कानून को भारत का कोई भी हाई कोर्ट अगर अल्ट्रा वायरस बोलता है, one can take a view by saying that it has a pan-India applicability and it has a pan-India binding value. Hence, on that basis, if some builder wants to take a call, they have a legal recourse. Either they can directly go to the court, or on the basis of this judgment, they can follow this judgment on the basis of the Supreme Court judgment of Kusum ingots, and they can go forward and say कि हमको हमारे पास अगर लैंड के एक्चुअल वैल्यू अवेलेबल है तो हम बोलेंगे, नहीं तो हम वैल्यूएशन रूल्स के हिसाब से बेसिकली विल गो फॉरवर्ड. All those who have paid tax, can they claim a refund of this? Again, because as I said, this judgment does have a binding value across India because of the ultra virus declaration given by the Honorable High Court. Builder can file a refund application. Only problem will be builder has to prove that he has not recovered the tax from the recipient. If they have recovered the tax from the recipient, they have paid it back to the recipient. And second, they are filing the refund application within 2 years. Can buyer claim a refund? That's a very interesting question. And I think uska legal answer is yes. There was a problem that there was no option available on the GST portal. But yesterday only on the GST portal, they have started this facility that somebody who is unregistered, who is a recipient and he wants to file a refund application, he can get a temporary ID generated and file the refund application. So now there is a practical solution also to this case. Recipient can go ahead, file a refund application on the basis of this judgment. Obviously, they have to fight it out with the tax authorities. But yes, this judgment does hold a good value. And now there is a mechanism available on the GST portal also. Is this judgment final? Unlike Mohit Minerals, this judgment probably may not be final because there is a very strong possibility the department would not agree to what the Gujarat High Court have said, and they would go to the Supreme Court. So what happens in Supreme Court will be dependent on the times to come, but still it's a good case to argue in this regard. Implication, I think जो problem यहाँ पर builders के case में 1/3 में है, similar problems in respect of all those who are selling solar power generating systems, solar power based devices, where there the notification says 70% shall be value of goods and 30% shall be value of services. And there again, a lot of people have a problem by saying the 70-30 ratio is arbitrary. This is not correct. The ratio could have been something else. On reality, generally the ratio is 95-5. 95% is value of goods and 5% is services, or 90% or 10%. And maybe they can take shelter of this judgment, challenge it further. Maybe they can take argument from this judgment and decide what needs to be done. From this, let's go to refunds. And refunds, there are very interesting issues which are coming up. In fact, there is a recent Supreme Court judgment which is against the SSC. And I'm not talking about VKC Footcare. मैं inverted duty structure की बात नहीं कर रहा हूँ. But there is a judgment which came in April 2022 where department went into appeal. And again, that judgment was given by the Gujarat High Court in favor of the SSC. So up till now, हमने जितने भी तीनों judgment देखे हैं, they have come from Gujarat High Court. Out of that, 2 have gone to the Supreme Court up till now. And in those 2 in the Supreme Court, 1 has come to the SSC's favor, 1 has come in department's favor. But again, at the end of it, when you will read this, you'll realize it is at least at the crux of it is in the SSC's favor. What is that? So what did Supreme Court say? First of all, without giving any background, Supreme Court ने बोला कि अगर कहीं पर भी रिफंड मिलना है किसी SSC को जीरो रेटेड सप्लाईज के केस में, और अगर वो रिफंड ऑर्डर पास होने के 60 दिन के अंदर एसएससी को नहीं मिलता है, चाहे वो एलयूटी के अगेंस्ट में अनयूटिलाइज इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट का रिफंड हो या फिर आईजीएसटी लगाकर मैंने एक्सपोर्ट करा है और ऑटोमेटिक रिफंड जो कस्टम्स के थ्रू आना हो, अगर वो रिफंड हो और वो दोनों ही मुझे अगर 60 दिन के अंदर नहीं मिलते हैं, देन इन दैट केस आई एम एंटाइटल्ड फॉर इंटरेस्ट. एंड सुप्रीम कोर्ट हैज सेड कि जो इंटरेस्ट है ये 6% से मिलेगा. गुजरात हाई कोर्ट ने बोला था कि दैट इंटरेस्ट शैल बी पेएबल एट द रेट ऑफ 9% बाय द रेवेन्यू. बट ऑनरेबल सुप्रीम कोर्ट हैज सेड नो, 9% इज एप्लीकेबल ओनली वेयर जब कोई ऑर्डर पास किया जाता है. In this case, this is a judgment which is coming out of a refund application, and hence it shall be payable at the rate of 6%. तो ये जो judgment negative है, ये only to the extent of 9% और 6% के बीच का है. But Supreme Court has also said interest is payable, and it's a judgment in case of Willowwood Chemicals Private Limited, April 2022 judgment. अब ये judgment 6 और 9 वाला काम का नहीं है, मतलब ये इतना relevant बात नहीं है कि rate क्या होनी चाहिए. बट रेलेवेंट बात ये है कि क्या हम हमारे क्लाइंट्स को एडवाइस कर रहे हैं कि इफ यू आर गेटिंग अ डिलेड रिफंड, यू आर एंटाइटल्ड फॉर एन इंटरेस्ट, एंड दैट इंटरेस्ट शैल बी एट द रेट ऑफ 6% ऑन द अमाउंट ऑफ डिलेड on the amount of delayed refund which you have got. And in this regard, that Gujarat High Court judgment which came way back in 2019, आज से लगभग 3 साल पहले that judgment came, और उस judgment के अंदर which was titled a natural saraf stone, Gujarat High Court ने बोला if somebody who is basically charging IGST, showing that in GST returns, that data is transmitting from IceGate portal, जिसके बारे में हम सब जानते हैं, and Customs Department is processing the refund automatically, and refund is coming automatically to your bank account. और अगर वो refund आपको 7 दिन के अंदर रिटर्न फाइल करने की नहीं आता, बशर्ते आपने रिटर्न सही तरीके से फाइल करा है, तो आपको 90% के ऊपर ब्याज मिलेगा 9% से, और उसके बाद सब्सिक्वेंटली जो डिले है उसके ऊपर एडिशनल 9% से आपको ब्याज मिलेगा, जिसको सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने बोला कि 60 दिन के अंदर अगर पैसा नहीं आता है तो सेक्शन 56 में लिखा है आपको 6% से ब्याज मिलेगा. The point is, are we advising to our clients? Are we telling our clients कि आपको जितने भी रिफंड डिलेड मिल रहे हैं, एसएससी का एक आर्गुमेंट रहता है कि ब्याज की बात छोड़िए, मेरा मूल पैसा मुझे मिल जाए वही बड़ी बात है. But now we have a Supreme Court judgment which refers to section 56, and they say you're entitled for the interest and department is duty bound to give that interest at the rate of 6% to you. What one has to do? One has to first identify they have to file a refund application. Now there is a challenge जहां पर automatic refund है, that is somebody who has charged IGST on their invoices and got a refund from the customs department directly. किसके आगे refund application file होनी चाहिए? Before the CGST officer, your proper officer on the GST portal, or there has to be manual application to the relevant port? On this, there is a dispute between both the authorities, because I have practically done that. And I think that the CGST officer says that custom officer will give the refund. Custom officer says this is not a matter of customs. हम तो सिर्फ refund process करते हैं, so we will not give you any interest. The CGST officer will give you will entertain the refund application for interest. The practical answer is file refund application at both the places. One of them will basically be able to explain who is the proper officer. It appears as of now the manner in which the law is written that CGST officer is the proper officer to grant the refund. So in few of the matters, I've got a refund from the CGST officer. In few of the matters, I have been given an order by the customs. But whatsoever is the case, our apprehension should be file a refund application at both the places and let them decide who will give the refund. Is there a time limit? That's the most important question. क्या इसके ऊपर भी 2 साल की time limit है? And the interesting answer is no. There is no time limit applicable for these kind of refund application for interest. In fact, any period starting from 1st July 2017, उसमें किसी भी refund अगर आपको 60 दिन के बाद मिला, you're entitled to file your interest refund of that interest today, or to claim that interest today, because this is not an application under section 54. और जो section 54 की application है उसमें 2 साल की time limit applicable है. 56 के अंदर बेसिकली जो इंटरेस्ट का एंटाइटलमेंट है उसके ऊपर कोई 2 साल की टाइम लिमिट एप्लीकेबल नहीं है. एंड दैट इज व्हाई इट इज अ गुड केस टू से दैट फॉर ऑल लास्ट 5 years there is a lot of value addition we can give to the client. Take up the assignment, tell the client, let's review when did you get your refund, put some Excel calculation, and invariably or not, I think 90% of the cases you'll be able to tell your client that you're entitled to claim the interest. Now, what is going to be the amount of interest? If it is a substantial amount, this is the amount which assessee does not know that is entitled to get today. And whatever he gets is going to be beyond what he has got today. So I think it's a good judgment. All of us should use that. All of us should advise our clients, and we should tell them they should be vigilant. And I'm sure after this, when Supreme Court has said that the interest shall be payable at the rate of 6%, it will at least expedite department to some extent. In case it doesn't happen, doesn't matter, we are entitled to claim the interest at the rate of 6%. One more issue which comes up in respect of refund, which is a very interesting issue, and I think this is something which we have to again work out as practicing chartered accountants. This is not a matter of, this is not something which probably department could have think of, but yeah, there is a possibility the manner in which the law is written. If I tell you that your client is 100% exporter and he has paid tax on all the inward supplies, can he claim refund of all the tax which he has paid on his inward supplies? उसने अपनी inward supplies पे जितना भी tax GST पे करा क्या उसका वो refund ले सकता है? And our answer will be that no, he may not be able to claim refund of everything because there are certain block credits. तो because block credits का हम input tax credit नहीं ले सकते तो हम refund भी नहीं ले सकते आगे. Similarly, अगर किसी सप्लायर ने गलत टैक्स चार्ज कर लिया है जिसका मैं क्रेडिट नहीं ले सकता हूं तो उसका भी मैं रिफंड जीएसटी विभाग से नहीं ले सकता. सिमिलरली अगर कोई क्रेडिट मुझे जीएसटीआर 2A में नहीं दिख रही है तो मैं उसका रिफंड नहीं ले सकता. नेक्स्ट, एसईजेड यूनिट रिफंड नहीं ले सकते बिकॉज डिपार्टमेंट सेज एसईजेड कैन नॉट फाइल अ रिफंड एप्लीकेशन. And last, supplier has shown that in GSTR 2A, but it is not appearing in my GSTR 3B, and I can't claim the refund. So these are all those possible places जहाँ पे there is a blockage. जहाँ पर as an 100% exporter, when I'm bringing 100% foreign currency for my client sitting in India for the government, and government says they don't want to tax the exports. Indirectly, my exports are getting costly by all these GST which I am paying on my inward supplies. Can I claim a refund of it? That's the question which comes up. Now when you look at the refund scheme, you realize दो तरीके के रिफंड्स है. एक है IGST लगाकर एक्सपोर्ट करना और दूसरा है LUT में एक्सपोर्ट करना, इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट रिटर्न में लेना और फिर एक मैनुअल एप्लीकेशन फाइल करना. दोनों के अंदर एक समानता है. समानता ये है कि हम जब क्रेडिट लेते हैं तो हम हमारी GSTR 3B के अंदर क्रेडिट लेते हैं. And that means it has to be input tax credit to claim a refund. And there this question comes up, what is difference between input tax credit and ITC award? So input tax defined in section 2 subsection 62, it says whatever CGST, SGST, IGST compensation says which I am paying on my inward supplies, that is called as input tax. तो चाहे मैं इसका क्रेडिट लूं या नहीं लूं, ये इनपुट टैक्स तो हमेशा कहलाएगा. इसमें से जिसका मैं क्रेडिट लेता हूं वो कहलाता है इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट. और इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट में कहां लेता हूं, दैट आई टेक इन माय GSTR 3B. और हम जब रिफंड लेने जाते हैं तो हम बात करते हैं कि जो रिफंड मिलता है वो इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट जो हमने GSTR 3B के अंदर लिया उसका रिफंड मिलता है. दैट मींस वी लीव असाइड व्हाटएवर इज देयर इन इनपुट टैक्स व्हिच इज नॉट पार्ट ऑफ योर इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट. नाउ whether refund provisions are written like that, that's the important question here. So when you go to section 54(1) talks about, and that's the very important thing. 54(1) says any person claiming refund of any tax or interest, if any, paid on such tax or any other amount paid by him may make an application before expiry of 2 years. So 54(1) कहता है any person can claim a refund of tax paid subject to your filing the application within 2 years. और आगे हम बात करेंगे तो unjust enrichment की बात करेंगे. 54(3) कहता है जिसके तहत हम मैनुअली LUT के अगेंस्ट में रिफंड एप्लीकेशंस फाइल करते हैं, वो कहता है सब्जेक्ट टू प्रोविजन ऑफ सेक्शन 10 रजिस्टर्ड सबसेक्शन 10 रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन में क्लेम रिफंड ऑफ एनी अनयूटिलाइज्ड इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट. So interestingly friends, if you note it, 54(1) talks about person claiming refund of any tax. 54(3) talks about refund of any unutilized input tax credit. Okay. What if I say I don't want to file a refund claim under 54(3) but I want to file a refund claim under 54(1)? Can I do that? For that I have to read what is the definition of word refund. So 54 के अंदर ही refund की definition लिखी हुई है, and refund definition says refund includes refund of tax paid on zero rated supplies of goods or services or both, or on यहाँ से it is important, or on input or input services used in making such zero rated supplies, and full stop. So when you read definition of refund, it says whatever tax you have paid on input and input services used in making zero rated supplies, that becomes part of the refund because you can claim refund of that tax which you have paid on input and input services used in making zero rated supplies. Meaning thereby, if I can prove that whatever medical insurance I've done for my employees, I have used that in making the zero rate supplies of the goods, I am entitled to claim the refund under 54(1) without claiming input tax credit of it. अगर मैं उसका input tax credit नहीं भी claim करता हूँ तो भी 54(1) में जाके I can go forward, file a refund application under any other category, and the manner in which it is written, I can claim the refund. That means all these things which you just saw, these block credits, wrong tax, not appearing in 2A, if I have a proper document, I can prove I made payment to my supplier, and I can have a nexus of this with my outward supplies, which are 100% zero rate supplies, or maybe proportionate, whatever is the case. I can go ahead and file a refund application. This needs to be tested. I'm sure some of you would say कि this is against the settled principle of कि हम RFD 01 जो फाइल करते हैं 89(3) में against input tax credit उसके against जाके, it looks like so, but the intention of the government in respect of refund is such that if you are bringing foreign currency into India, they don't want to load you with the taxation, and that is why the definition of refund is written like this. So it's a good case to argue, subject to that you have proper documentation in this regard. Next, one small point in refund, which again affects all those people who are exporters and they are under some scheme. So हम जितने भी लोग GST में practice करते हैं, all of us I've been told कि GST के साथ में customs law है जिसका भी कुछ implication है. But because at least CIRC एक ऐसा reason है which is a landlocked region, we do not have any ports around. Because we do not have any ports around, lot of imports which happen in our territory, that first of all comes to the other states like Gujarat, Maharashtra, or Tamil Nadu, or maybe east side, all those places. So because the imports happen there, हमारे यहाँ पे custom का implication कम है. But still, there are provisions in the custom which allow people who are into landlocked areas that they can claim benefit under customs for a lot of schemes. So there are advanced authorization schemes, there are EPCG schemes. There is a scheme under GST for deemed exports. There is a scheme under GST where I can procure goods as a merchant exporter by paying tax at the rate of 0.1%. Now, if I am doing all of these things, जहाँ पे मेरी inward side के ऊपर I am taking the benefit and I am exporting, then there is rule 9610 of the CGST rules, where 9610 says you can't export goods on payment of IGST. If you do export on payment of IGST, don't claim a refund. तो अगर आपने इंपोर्ट इनवर्ड साइड के ऊपर कोई आईजीएसटी का छूट लिया हुआ है जो इन 4 नोटिफिकेशंस के अंदर फॉल करता है, 78, 79 ऑफ कस्टम्स एंड 48 and 40 of CGST, then in that case you can't export on payment of IGST or you can't claim the refund. Now, what is the problem? The problem is, at least now department have realized that specifically people have used advanced authorizations. What is advanced authorization? मुझे ऐसा माल बनाना है, जिस माल बना के एक्सपोर्ट करना है जिसके लिए मुझे कुछ चीजें इंपोर्ट करने की जरूरत है. तो एफटीपी के अंदर देयर इज अ स्पेसिफिक बेनिफिट व्हिच इज अवेलेबल वेयर आई कैन इंपोर्ट गुड्स विदाउट पेइंग एनी कस्टम्स ड्यूटी और आईजीएसटी विद अ डिक्लेरेशन कि मैं इस माल से गुड्स बना के एक्सपोर्ट करूंगा एंड आई विल ऐड अ सर्टेन वैल्यू एडिशन और इतना फॉरेन करेंसी में इंडिया में लेके आऊंगा एक स्पेसिफिक पीरियड के अंदर. एंड ऑन दैट बेसिस गवर्नमेंट अलाउज मी टू इंपोर्ट क्लियर बिल ऑफ एंट्री विदाउट पेइंग एनी आईजीएसटी. Now, what has happened is people have imported goods, they have not taken care of this rule and they have exported goods outside India on payment of IGST. They have got the IGST refund and now DGGST everywhere, DGGST, anti-evasion, and now recently, approximately in the last month of May, everywhere air cargos of customs, ICDs of customs, they have started issuing notices to all the exporters कि अगर आपने advance authorization में या आपने एसटीपी के अंदर या फिर आपने मर्चेंट एक्सपोर्टर के तौर पे या डीम्ड एक्सपोर्ट के अंदर अगर आपने कुछ प्रोक्योरमेंट करा और बेनिफिट लिया है और आपने आईजीएसटी का रिफंड लिया, यू आर नॉट एंटाइटल्ड फॉर द रिफंड. And it's a problem. It's a big problem because once you give back the refund to the government, government will not give you input tax credit back. आपको input tax credit नहीं मिलने वाला है वापस. What is the solution? The solution is this notification has an explanation 16/2020. जो retrospectively add one notification, it has been added with effect from 23/10/2017 जब से ये rule है, which says अगर आपने inward के टाइम पे कोई benefit लिया है and you're ready to surrender that benefit, then in that case आपका refund आपसे वापस नहीं लिया जाएगा, आप 9610 की coverage में नहीं आएंगे. So there are a lot of people who are thinking of giving back the refund, export refund back to the government and thinking that government will give back the input tax credit. Well, that's not the correct position. The correct position is, if your client is operating under any of this notification and he has exported goods on payment of IGST, what he should do is he should go back to the customs, tell them that I want to pay IGST on my imports. If I have procured anything as a merchant exporter, tell my supplier to issue a debit note on me for a differential tax, pay all the tax along with interest to the government in case of direct imports, tell my supplier to pay the additional tax to the government along with interest, and then tell the government now I'm not entitled to give the refund back. What is the benefit? आप जितना भी इनवर्ड साइड पे टैक्स पे कर रहे हैं उसका you can very well claim input tax credit. There is no restriction. There is absolutely no problem in claiming the input tax credit because section 16 subsection 4 जो टाइम लिमिट की बात करता है इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट लेने के लिए, वो टाइम लिमिट सिर्फ इनवॉइस के ऊपर एप्लीकेबल है, डेबिट नोट और बिल ऑफ एंट्री के ऊपर एप्लीकेबल नहीं है. इनफैक्ट डेबिट नोट के ऊपर भी एप्लीकेबल है तो जिस साल में डेबिट नोट हुआ वो साल खत्म होने के 6 महीने तक एप्लीकेबल है, और बिल ऑफ एंट्री के ऊपर इट इज नॉट एप्लीकेबल एट ऑल. सो इफ आई कैन गेट माय बिल ऑफ एंट्री रीअसेस्ड, अगर मैंने कुछ इंपोर्ट करा था और उसमें मैंने कोई बेनिफिट लिया और मैं बेनिफिट सरेंडर करके गवर्नमेंट को आईजीएसटी पे करना चाहता हूं इंपोर्ट के ऊपर अलॉन्ग विद इंटरेस्ट, there is no problem in that. You can do that, you can claim the credit of it. The only loss is the loss of interest which you are paying, but that loss may not, commercially that loss may not be big enough where your refund will be taken back by the government along with the interest. So it's a good position which one may look at. What is the practical problem in this? Practical problem is ever since DGGST has understood this कि inward side के ऊपर people can go back and surrender the benefits, they have returned to all the ports across India कि किसी का bill of entry reassess मत करिए जिन्होंने भी IGST लगा के export करा और import पे कोई benefit लिया हुआ. But that's not the correct position of the law. That instruction does not have any legal validity for a very simple reason. Again, we have a Gujarat High Court judgment. And in fact, that's the fourth Gujarat High Court judgment which is favorable for us. That is Cosmo Films. That Cosmo Films judgment says all those people who are hit by 9610, if subsequently they want to surrender their import benefits, they can go forward, surrender their import benefits, and they're absolutely entitled to keep the refund of IGST which they have received on the exports. So I think this is again one strategy जहाँ पे customs का थोड़ा input है, probably because majority of us do not practice in customs, that's why we do not look at it. But because it has an implication under GST, rather than giving back the refund amount, or rather than fighting with the government by saying कि हमको तो interest मिला है, which is हमको तो जो refund मिला है, which is a proper refund, it makes a lot of sense to actually go back, look at your inward supplies, see to it if you can pay additional tax, claim the credit of it, and you can stay happy without having too much of litigation. With this, I come back to some of the changes which are there in input tax credit. I'll take all the questions in the hand. I can see some raise of hands. I'll take those questions at the end. I'll first of all try and complete the points which I have, which I think are relevant for the members, and then probably we'll take some questions. Coming to some burning issues which are there in input tax credit. And I think first issue which departments has often started raising everywhere across India is they are saying ye input credit aapko nahi milega. And what is the reason behind ye input credit nahi milega? They say this is for personal consumption. So they say whatever expense you are doing in course of your business, it is proper, no problem. Section 16(1) says all your inward supplies which are in course and furtherance of business claim credit. There is absolutely no problem with it. Where is the problem? There is section 17(5)(g). So first of all, 17(5) is notwithstanding 16. So आपका business expense तो है. But if that goods and services जिसके ऊपर you have claimed the credit are used for personal consumption, then credit is a block credit. And that is why department is saying uniform का credit नहीं मिलेगा, laptop का credit नहीं मिलेगा, packaged water का credit नहीं मिलेगा. In some cases they are saying paper का credit भी नहीं मिलेगा because paper is used by a person who is writing on it. And hotel का credit नहीं मिलेगा, traveling का credit नहीं मिलेगा because all of this is used by a person for the purpose of personal consumption. And that is why they are saying that all this credit is not allowed. So they are saying all these expenses are in course and furtherance of business. There is absolutely no problem. But a credit हम आपको नहीं दे सकते, which is for personal consumption. And I think there it becomes important how do we read the law? Because when you look at section 17(5)(g), 17(5)(g) says notwithstanding anything contained in subsection 1 of section 16 and subsection 1 of section 18, input tax credit shall not be available in respect of following. So first thing is this restriction is in respect of all those people who have claimed input tax credit. Now, when you read it together, it says in respect of following goods and services both used for personal consumption. That means person who is taking the credit, he should have used the goods for the purpose of personal consumption. Now, it may look absurd, this interpretation, by saying that in case of a company, there can never be a personal consumption. So thus this clause is only applicable in case of a proprietorship concerns where somebody who is registered in GST, but also a real person, a human being, and he has probably consumed some things which are for his personal consumption, and in that case only the credit can be disallowed. Well, probably that's what the Gujarat High Court again said in case of income tax judgment in 2001 in case of Sayaji Iron Engineering Company versus Commissioner of Income Tax. Gujarat High Court, they were basically looking at expense under income tax, where expense under income tax, they were looking at some perquisites which were giving to the director in terms of car and other things. An issue which was raised by the department was all these expenses were for personal use. And the Gujarat High Court in that case said is that when you will look at personal use, you will not look at personal use from the perspective of the beneficiary, but you will look at from the perspective of the person who is claiming the input tax credit. So because the person who is claiming the deduction under income tax. So deduction under income tax has been claimed by the company, and company cannot have a personal consumption because company itself is an artificial person. That is why you cannot disallow the expense on this pretext by saying that this is an expense for personal use. Same logic we can bring here under GST by saying that whenever you are looking at a personal consumption, you have to look at qua the person who is claiming the credit. जो क्रेडिट क्लेम कर रहा है आपको उसके पर्सपेक्टिव से देखने की जरूरत है, आपको उसके पर्सपेक्टिव से देखने की जरूरत नहीं है जो एक्चुअली ये जो एक्सपेंसेस है ये आर दे or the benefit of it is going within the human body or not, or that is for the benefit of an individual or not. So all these expenses are in course and furtherance of business. They are very much important for the successful presence and effective working of that specific person who is claiming the credit, and that is why all this credit cannot be debarred if they are not in respect of an individual. Even if they are in respect of an individual, there probably one argument can come that even if it is an expense in course of business, but that is for the person who is claiming the credit, there the credit may be disallowed, but in all other cases credit cannot be disallowed. We have a high court judgment in this regard, which is very useful. Then we come to another issue, very interesting issue, which department has often again started raising it, and that issue has come because of some accounting treatment and also on the basis of what has happened in last 4 years in our books of accounting. So now that we are in the 5th year, we are almost completing the 5th year of GST. 5 साल के अंदर जितने भी कैपिटल गुड्स खरीदे होंगे, तो जीएसटी के अंदर अपने आप में एक assumption है कि कैपिटल गुड्स की जो लाइफ है, that is effectively only for 5 years. So any goods which I have purchased somewhere in the month of in July 2017 up till let's say March 18, that 5 years life is coming to an end. Now all of us know again practically that law has given a timeline of 5 years. But it may not be necessary that I'm actually using the goods for 5 years. Like for example, laptops, computers, they have a law under GST, they have a life under GST for 5 years, but effective life, all of us know a laptop or a computer will have for 2 years, 3 years maximum. Now, if somebody is discarding those laptops or computers and they have claimed the input tax credit, are they required to reverse it? That's the question. There are two possible ways to look at it. First of all, is it a deemed supply? And why somebody will say it is a deemed supply? Because Schedule 1, Entry 1 has a point. Schedule 1 again, वो schedule जो कहता है supply without consideration are also taxable. And it says permanent transfer or disposal of a business asset on which input tax credit has been availed on such as asset, then it becomes a deemed supply. So one possible answer which looks like is all laptops, computers, which I am basically discarding off without selling it to somebody else. That's a pure case of a deemed supply. It's a case of deemed supply. No value is there. Then I have to go to the valuation rules. When I go to the valuation rules, there is rule 30. And rule 30 says you have to look at the cost of production or cost of manufacture or cost of acquisition. And when you look at the cost of acquisition, uske upar add 10% value and that becomes the deemed value. So Schedule 1, Entry 1 kind of overlooks whatever has been depreciation in last 2-3 years on that particular computer. वो कहते हैं 5 साल से पहले अगर बेचोगे, and if you treat it as a deemed supply, then in that case go to valuation rules, apply rule 30, and on the basis of rule 30 you pay tax on the whole value plus add 10% of it, and that's what the government should get. So it's kind of a double whammy again. आपने 2 साल इस्तेमाल करा, क्रेडिट लिया, पर अगर आपने उसको 5 साल से पहले बेच दिया, तो maybe you have to sell it above your cost price. That's what the argument comes from the department. That's number one. Or department will otherwise say you go to 17.5H and reverse the ITC. If you don't want to pay tax additional on that 10%, आप 17.5H में जाइए, and it says goods lost, stolen, destroyed, written off or disposed of by way of gift of free sample. And let's say if you're writing off the goods, writing off capital goods, then it is covered by 17.5H. And interestingly, 17.5H does not have a time limit of 5 years. So if let's say I'm writing off any capital goods from my books of account after 7 years, on which I've claimed any GST credit, though it is futuristic in nature, but मान लीजिए मैं कोई capital goods आज 5 साल के अंत में जाके I'm writing off from my books of account, मेरे statutory auditor ने बोला कि I have to write it off, whether it is covered by 17.5H. Now when you look at 17.5H, a plain reading of it says it looks like it is covered in 17.5H because goods are being written off. And again there our interpretation comes in. So there is one specific way of reading the law. हम जब कानून पढ़ते हैं, and I'm sure हमने ये चीज पढ़ी होगी, when you look at a particular word, so word here is goods lost, stolen, destroyed, written or disposed of by way of gift of free sample. You can't read written off in isolation. आप written off को isolation में नहीं पढ़ सकते, आपको इसके आगे और पीछे के words भी पढ़ने पड़ेंगे. You have to read the company of the words which are around it. What is the meaning of how does a goods will be lost? That means physically I will not have that goods. Goods stolen, that means again I am deprived of those goods physically. Goods destroyed, that means I can't use them further. Written off or disposed of by way of gift of free sample. So this written off has to be again that I'm writing off the goods physically, those goods are physically going away from me. So if I have an asset in my asset register, but मैं सिर्फ किताबों में उसको write off कर रहा हूँ because of my accounting principle, one strong argument is that I'm not required to reverse any input tax credit, and it is not covered by Schedule 1 also because this is not a permanent transfer or disposal. Similarly, this written off, I can't read in isolation and I have to read with the words along with it is written. Till that I am not physically writing it off, physically I am not giving to somebody else, I am not required to reverse the credit. Having said that, let's say मैं actually physically write off कर रहा हूँ कुछ capital goods को, I am discarding them after 5 years. क्या मुझे पूरा इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट रिवर्स करने की जरूरत है जो मैंने 2017 में लिया था? बिकॉज 17.5H ये बात नहीं करता है कि आपको आईटीसी कितना रिवर्स करना है. 17.5H ये बात करता है कि आपको तो आईटीसी रिवर्स करना है इफ बेसिकली यू आर नॉट इन फिजिकल पोजीशन ऑफ दोज गुड्स. द आंसर टू दैट कम्स फ्रॉम रूल 43. एंड रूल 43 जो एग्जेम्प्टेड और टैक्सेबल के रिस्पेक्ट में हम यूज करते हैं जब आप किसी कैपिटल गुड्स को यूज करते हैं, मे बी फॉर एग्जेम्प्टेड सप्लाईज एंड टैक्सेबल सप्लाईज, वहां पर देयर इज एन एक्सप्लेनेशन. And explanation says that for the purpose of this rule, हम capital goods की life को effectively 5 साल की मानेंगे. Now the problem which comes is somebody will say कि यहाँ पर rule 43 आप क्यों लगाएंगे? Why will you apply rule 43 here? Because rule 43 may not be applicable in this case because यहाँ पर कोई exempted supply नहीं है. It's only a taxable supply which I do. कोई exempted supply नहीं है और मैं मेरे goods को write off कर रहा हूँ और basically I'm physically discarding them. तो why will I go to rule 43? One logical way of coming to rule 43, क्योंकि अगर हम rule 43 में नहीं आएंगे तो asset की useful life 5 साल नहीं होगी और हमको वो जो 5% पर क्वार्टर का depreciation का जो benefit मिलता है वो depreciation का benefit नहीं मिलेगा. What is the answer? So answer is that we have section 17 subsection 1. Section 17 subsection 1 is कि अगर आप कोई goods को अपने business purposes या other than business purposes के लिए use करते हैं, then you have to proportionately reverse the input tax credit. 17.2 कहता है अगर आप अपने गुड्स को टैक्सेबल और एग्जेम्प्टेड के लिए यूज करते हैं तो आपको प्रोपोर्शनली रिवर्स द क्रेडिट. और 70 की बिजनेस, नॉन बिजनेस और टैक्सेबल एग्जेम्प्टेड का मैकेनिज्म कैसे कैलकुलेट करेंगे उसके लिए हैव टू गो टू रूल 43. सो वन कैन टेक एन आर्गुमेंट बाय सेइंग कि जो मेरे कैपिटल गुड्स हैं जिनको गोइंग फॉरवर्ड आई विल नॉट बी एबल टू यूज इन माय बिजनेस बिकॉज आई एम गेटिंग रिड ऑफ देम, आई एम कवर्ड बाय 17.1 बिजनेस, नॉन बिजनेस. Because I am covered by 17.1, I will go to rule 43. Rule 43 में कैपिटल गुड्स की लाइफ 5 साल है और वहां पे 17.5 के रिवर्सल के लिए लिखा हुआ है कि आपको 17.5 का रिवर्सल करना है. बट बिकॉज इफेक्टिव लाइफ इज 5 ईयर, मैं जितने भी 20 क्वार्टर होते हैं 5 सालों के अंदर उनका 5% का जो डेप्रिसिएशन लेके आई कैन क्लेम द बेनिफिट. जो भी यूजफुल लाइफ बचेगी उसका आई विल डू द रिवर्सल. That is one possible way to come out of this reversal. Otherwise, department can tomorrow come forward and say कि अगर आप capital goods को write off कर रहे हैं अपनी books of accounts और physically भी you are giving it away, you have to reverse the whole input tax credit. So that is one strong argument which basically somebody can have in respect of these capital goods. Immovable property I'm not touching here. One very interesting point in respect of ITC, input tax credit, that is e-invoicing. Now generally e-invoicing का concept हम समझते हैं supplier के perspective से कि सप्लायर को इनवॉइस बनाने की जरूरत है जिसका टर्नओवर 20 करोड़ रुपए से ऊपर का है एंड इट इज एप्लीकेबल ऑन इनवॉइस, क्रेडिट नोट और डेबिट नोट इशूड बाय अ सप्लायर. और ये परचेज, इनवॉइस, डिलीवरी चालान इन सब के ऊपर इनवॉइस एप्लीकेबल नहीं है. बट दिस कॉन्सेप्ट more than the supplier, this concept is now going to be used probably by the revenue for the benefit from their side to restrict the input tax credit. Why restricting the input tax credit? So there is a rule 48 sub rule 5 which talks about manner of issuing the invoice, and 48 sub rule 5 says, I'll just read it. It says every invoice issued by a person to whom sub rule 4 applies in any manner other than the manner specified in said sub rule shall not be treated as invoice. Meaning thereby, let's say I am entitled to, I am compulsorily required to issue an invoice which is having IRN, and it has to be an e-invoice. And let's say I give you an invoice which does not have any IRN number, it does not have a QR code. But मैंने वो invoice मेरी GST-01 में दिखाया, आपकी 2A में दिख रहा है, आपने मुझे पेमेंट करा, goods और services receive हुए हैं, and you have taken the credit. Tomorrow department comes to you and says कि you are not entitled to take the credit because आपका जो supplier है उसने आपको जो invoice दिया है उसके ऊपर IRN number नहीं लिखा हुआ है. और रूल 48 सब रूल 5 में लिखा है कि अगर आपके पास ऐसा कोई इनवॉइस आता है जिसपे आयरन होना चाहिए और आयरन नहीं है तो वैलिड इनवॉइस नहीं है. और बिकॉज वो वैलिड इनवॉइस नहीं है, सेक्शन 16 सब सेक्शन 2 में लिखा है कि आप एक इनवॉइस के ऊपर ही क्रेडिट ले सकते हैं. सो दिस इज नॉट अ वैलिड इनवॉइस एंड देयर ऑल द प्रॉब्लम स्टार्ट्स एंड दे विल से यू आर नॉट एंटाइटल्ड फॉर क्रेडिट, रिवर्स द क्रेडिट, पे इंटरेस्ट, पे पेनल्टी एंड ऑल दोस थिंग्स. एंड यू विल रियलाइज डिपार्टमेंट कह रहा है ये फेक ट्रांजेक्शन नहीं है. आपको गुड्स मिले, सर्विस मिली, टैक्स पे हुआ है, आपके पास इनवॉइस है, सब चीजें हैं, पर फिर भी हम आपको क्रेडिट नहीं देंगे क्योंकि इसके ऊपर IRN नहीं है. Therefore, I think the first thing to understand this can be a problem, the manner in which rule is written. That is why as a recipient it becomes your responsibility, चाहे आपका client का turnover 20 करोड़ से कम का है, 20 करोड़ से ज्यादा का है, that your client should understand कि उसके supplier के ऊपर e-invoicing applicable है या नहीं है. और अगर उसके supplier के ऊपर e-invoicing applicable है, then in that case he should always ensure that the supplier is issuing an IRN enabled invoice. वो कैसे आइडेंटिफाई कर सकता है कि सप्लायर के ऊपर ई-इनवॉइसिंग एप्लीकेबल है या नहीं है? सो व्हेन यू गो टू जीएसटी पोर्टल एंड व्हेन यू लॉग इन एंड यू पुट somebody's GST number, GST portal tells you a range of turnover which that person has done in previous year, and that gives you a fair bit of idea. If this turnover is between 20 crore to 50 crore or maybe beyond that, that means e-invoicing is applicable on that particular person. And once that is the case, recipient should always go back to the supplier, tell the supplier that if in case I receive an invoice which does not have an IRN, I will not entertain it. If I will entertain it, I am not going to make payment of it. If I am going to make payment of it, I will ask you to bear the responsibility if tomorrow department comes at my doorstep and they say you are not entitled for the credit. कितना contractually वो आपका रिसिपिएंट बाइंड कर सकता है, ऑब्वियसली दोनों के कॉन्ट्रैक्चुअल रिलेशनशिप के ऊपर डिपेंड करेगा, बट या देयर इज अ प्रॉब्लम इन दिस रिगार्ड बिकॉज ऑल दोस केसेस वेयर IRN इज नॉट देयर, IRN इज अ डिलेड IRN, डिपार्टमेंट हैज अ गुड केस टू आर्ग्यू कि आपकी इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट उतने एक्सटेंड तक डिलेड होनी चाहिए. सो दिस इज वन थिंग व्हिच मे बी एज अ पार्ट ऑफ योर ऑडिट चेकलिस्ट वी शुड टेल अवर क्लाइंट. There is one more implication on this on the supplier. Supplier के ऊपर there can be a penalty of 10,000 rupees for basically not complying with the provision of the act or not issuing the document as per the provision of the act. तो supplier के ऊपर अगर कोई भी implication है तो maximum 10,000 का या maybe worst case general penalty 50,000 rupees. And again it can be covered in a minor breach जिसको वो कम करा के 2,000 पे आ सकता है. प्रॉब्लम रिसिपिएंट की साइड में उसका ITC रिवर्सल प्लस देयर कैन बी पेनल्टी फॉर ट्रांजैक्शन रिस्पेक्ट ऑफ 10,000 अंडर सेक्शन 122. That is why e-invoicing non-compliance supplier के लिए इतना बड़ा प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, which is a problem for the recipient who is claiming the credit, and that is why recipient should always be vigilant whether supplier is covered on the e-invoicing or not. Last 2-3 things which I will cover and then I'll put an end and then we'll go to the question answer session. That is government contractors. And why I have chosen this government contractors is whatever amendment has happened from January 2022. And specifically again in states which are there in CIRC, which are developing states, which are not those states unlike Gujarat, Maharashtra or Karnataka or Tamil Nadu, but here because the infrastructure development is happening at a huge scale and it has happened at a huge scale in last 6-7 years, generally all those people who are supplying their services to government or semi-government organization, हम उनको common parlance की परिभाषा में कहते हैं कि ये government contractor है. अब जनवरी 2022 से क्या हुआ है कि गवर्नमेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्टर जो एक्चुअली में है उसकी सर्टेन सप्लाईज के ऊपर 12% टैक्स है और उसके अलावा जितने भी बाकी सब लोग हैं उनके ऊपर 18% टैक्स है. तो ये जो कॉमन पार्लेंस में परिभाषा है गवर्नमेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्टर की, इसके अंदर बदलाव है जहां पे आप कौन गवर्नमेंट का कॉन्ट्रैक्टर है, कौन लोकल अथॉरिटी का कॉन्ट्रैक्टर है, कौन गवर्नमेंटल अथॉरिटी का कॉन्ट्रैक्टर है, कौन गवर्नमेंट एंटिटी का कॉन्ट्रैक्टर है, वो इंपॉर्टेंट है. बिकॉज जनवरी 2022 के बाद गवर्नमेंट और लोकल अथॉरिटी के जो कॉन्ट्रैक्टर हैं उनके ऊपर जो टैक्स की रेट है, अगर वो वर्क्स कॉन्ट्रैक्ट सर्विस दे रहे हैं और वो भी स्पेसिफिक वर्क्स कॉन्ट्रैक्ट सर्विस दे रहे हैं तो 12% है. पर अगर कोई गवर्नमेंटल अथॉरिटी या गवर्नमेंट एंटिटी को कोई सर्विस दे रहा है, इररिस्पेक्टिव व्हाट इज द नेचर ऑफ सर्विस, अगर वो सर्विस जनरली 12% में कवर्ड नहीं है तो ऑल ऑफ देम आर कवर्ड अंडर 18%. And there, as a tax professional or as a chartered accountant, becomes very difficult for us to advise our clients what is the difference between government, local authority, government entity. Because इन सब की अलग अलग परिभाषा है और आपको हर एंटिटी का एक मास्टर एक्ट देखने की जरूरत है. Because tomorrow हो सकता है there is some organization for which your client is basically providing works contract service. आपको वो सरकारी एजेंसी का कानून जाके पढ़ना पड़ेगा, उसका एक्ट पढ़ना पड़ेगा, उसका विधान पढ़ना पड़ेगा, कौन से एक्ट के अंदर वो बनी है, उसके पास पैसा कहां से आ रहा है, दैट बिकम्स इंपॉर्टेंट. व्हाई आई एम सेइंग दिस, देयर इज डेफिनेशन ऑफ सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट गिवन अंडर जनरल क्लॉजेस एक्ट. सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट की परिभाषा ये है, एनीथिंग इन रिलेशन टू एनीथिंग डन और टू बी डन आफ्टर द कमेंसमेंट ऑफ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन मीन द प्रेसिडेंट. तो जितने भी लोग प्रेसिडेंट के ऑर्डर के तहत काम करते हैं, basically all those who are employees or who are falling under working under the subordinate to the president, they come under the definition of government. So all governmental departments, PWD, health department, sports department, finance ministry, all of them are part of the government. Any work which has been given by them directly to the contractors in respect of specific works contract, it still qualifies under 12%, but not 18%. Similarly, state government, जो लोग गवर्नर के ऑर्डर के तहत काम करते हैं, they are subordinate to the governor, and जो state health department, state education department directly which they are covered under, जो विभाग है, then basically they are covered under 12%. Then there is local authority, and probably जो local authority की definition CGST Act में दे रखी है, section 2, section 69 के अंदर, हम में से बहुत सारे लोगों ने इस amendment के पहले इस definition को नहीं पढ़ा था. In fact, we ignored that. और हमको लगता था लोकल अथॉरिटी के अंदर म्युनिसिपैलिटी, कंटोनमेंट बोर्ड, पंचायत सिर्फ यही कवर्ड है. ये तो कवर्ड है ही है. इसके अलावा देयर इज वन स्पेसिफिक क्लॉज. यू लुक एट फ्रॉम टॉप 3, इट सेज म्युनिसिपल कमिटी, जिला परिषद, डिस्ट्रिक्ट बोर्ड और एनी अदर अथॉरिटी लीगली एंटाइटल्ड टू और इंटरेस्टेड बाय द सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट और स्टेट गवर्नमेंट विद द कंट्रोल एंड मैनेजमेंट ऑफ म्युनिसिपल और लोकल फंड्स. दैट्स इंपॉर्टेंट. म्युनिसिपल कमिटी, जिला परिषद, डिस्ट्रिक्ट बोर्ड, ये सब तो लोकल अथॉरिटी है ही है. उसके अलावा कोई भी और अथॉरिटी जिसको सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट या स्टेट गवर्नमेंट ने लोकल फंड या म्युनिसिपल फंड का कंट्रोल या मैनेजमेंट दिया है, दैट आल्सो क्वालिफाइज एज लोकल अथॉरिटी. क्यों इंपॉर्टेंट है? बिकॉज लोकल अथॉरिटी के लिए स्पेसिफाइड वर्क्स कॉन्ट्रैक्ट में किया हुआ काम आज भी 12% में कवर्ड है. सो दैट्स अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग थिंग टू अंडरस्टैंड कि जस्ट बिकॉज पंचायत, म्युनिसिपैलिटी, कैंटोनमेंट बोर्ड, इन सब के अलावा कोई और अथॉरिटी चाहे किसी भी नाम से हो और उसको अगर सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट और स्टेट गवर्नमेंट ने उसके कानून के तहत अगर एक स्पेसिफिक लोकल फंड का मैनेजमेंट और उसकी रिकवरी करने का राइट दिया है या कोई म्युनिसिपल फंड का एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन और कंट्रोल दिया है, तो देयर आल्सो ट्रीटेड एज लोकल अथॉरिटी. सो दैट मींस इफ देयर इज एनी अथॉरिटी, फॉर एग्जांपल जल बोर्ड, there are jal boards in specific states. When you read their act, you will realize उनके act में लिखा है that they can have their own mannerism of basically having the charges. So jal board may not be government, jal board may not be central government, state government, but it may be a local authority और उसके लिए किया हुआ कोई काम है तो वो 12% में fall कर सकता है. And for that we had a specific explanation to this given in education guide, जहाँ पे पूछा गया था कि जो corporations और authority जो किसी कानून के तहत बनती हैं, क्या हम उनको गवर्नमेंट कह सकते हैं? एंड आंसर टू दैट इज उनको गवर्नमेंट नहीं कह सकते. दे मे बी गवर्नमेंटल अथॉरिटी, और अगर उनको लोकल अथॉरिटी बनना है तो आपको उनका फंड मैनेजमेंट और उसके राइट्स के बारे में हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड. सो आई थिंक दिस वी हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड. दिस व्हाट यू सी ऑन योर स्क्रीन, गवर्नमेंट अथॉरिटी और गवर्नमेंट एंटिटी. नाउ वर्क डन फॉर देम इट इज कवर्ड अंडर 18%, बट इट इज नॉट कवर्ड अंडर 12%. सो इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट टू अंडरस्टैंड. तो कोई गवर्नमेंट अथॉरिटी जिसको किसी कानून के तहत बनाया है, जिसको पार्लियामेंट में कानून पास करके बनाया गया है, या मान लीजिए स्टेट लेजिस्लेचर में कानून पास करके बनाया गया, जिसको स्पेसिफिक वो काम दिए जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन की आर्टिकल 243W और 243G में है, दैट इज 12th शेड्यूल के अंदर देयर इज समथिंग व्हिच हैज बीन गिवन टू देम. स्टिल इन ऑल दीस केसेस दे आर ट्रीटेड एज गवर्नमेंटल अथॉरिटी. सो लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल यू हैव डेवलपमेंट अथॉरिटीज इन योर स्पेसिफिक सिटीज. You go and read their laws, you will realize all of them are governmental authorities now. They are not local authority, not central government, not state government. तो जनवरी से पहले उनके लिए किया हुआ काम probably 12% में कवर हो रहा था. Now going forward, it may not get covered under 12%, it will get covered under 18%. Again, interesting to understand, सारे काम ऐसे नहीं हैं जो entity specific है. Like for example, construction of road, bridge, tunnel, terminal for road. All of this, even if it is done for a private person, but that road is for public use, it is covered under 12%. It doesn't matter who is the recipient. So what I'm trying to say, now going forward, this is a little bit of a challenge which we have all of us. And why this problem comes up? Because all these government contractors, they work on an inclusive tax rate basis. So their tender has to be very specific. तो हम fault नहीं कर सकते at the time of bidding the tender, because उनका L1 उसके हिसाब से decide हो रहा है. Somebody is quoting rate at is basically at the L1 going at 12%, but is taxable at the rate of 18%. Eventually, he will end up into loss. Somebody quoting at 12%, but rate is actually 12%. He may not qualify for the L1. So that is why it is important to understand that now, just by reading the GST law, you cannot advise कि आपका जो client है as a works contractor जो काम कर रहा है, it is working for government, state government, local authority और governmental authority. और रिसिपिएंट का स्पेसिफिक लॉ जाके आपको पढ़ने की जरूरत है, देन ओनली यू विल बी एबल टू फाइंड द आंसर. I'll come to second last thing, that is scrutiny of returns. I will not go into detail, but what I basically want to bring here is, in GST law, there are 3 specific chapters through which department can enter into books of account of any assessee. There is assessment 59 to 64, there is audit 65 66, and there is investigation 67 to 72. All of them culminate into a show cause notice. ऐसा नहीं है कि assessment, audit या inspection करके department वहीं order बना सकता है. They can't do that. If assessee does not agree, they have to issue a show cause notice either in the 73 or 74. इसमें से एक चैप्टर है 59 से 64, उसमें एक सेक्शन है सेक्शन 61 which talks about scrutiny of returns. उसके रिस्पेक्ट में there has been instruction issued in March 2022, जिसको हम हमारी प्रैक्टिकल भाषा में ASMT 10 कहते हैं. तो जो ASMT 10 हमको मिलते हैं now, उसके रिस्पेक्ट में there is an instruction. The instruction says now how a superintendent has to basically get the scrutiny of return done, what is the mannerism and what are the parameters on the basis of which they have to do the scrutiny. When you read that instruction, you realize that there are a lot of parameters written, approximately some 15-20 parameters which are there. Some of those parameters are not settled parameters. Like for example, what you see in your red, taxable value as per GST or 3B and details for which TDS TCS is deducted collected in T9. They are saying अगर आपका जिस वैल्यू पे TDS कटा है और जो वैल्यू आपने 3B में दिखाई, अगर उसमें फर्क है, आपके रिटर्न स्क्रूटनी के लिए पिक कर ली जाएगी, उसको डिस्क्रिपेंसी माना जाएगा और आपसे सवाल किया जाएगा. Now, सवाल करना is okay, but treating it as a discrepancy, prima facie, still that is okay, but treating it that it should always match is absolutely incorrect. And that's again a problem which all the works contractors have, because government deducts GST TDS on the basis of payment, and we raise invoice on the basis of accrual basis or advance, whichever is earlier. So there is a problem there. Similarly, if some supplier's registration has been cancelled retrospectively, now that also becomes a discrepancy as per the instruction, which is incorrect. Because अगर मैंने किसी की इनवॉइस पे क्रेडिट लिया है और जब मैंने क्रेडिट लिया था तब वो सप्लायर रजिस्टर्ड था, वो अपनी कंप्लायंस कर रहा था, for whatever reason his registration has been cancelled retrospectively, that cannot be a ground to say that my claim of input tax credit is invalid. And in that regard, we have a judgment from Calcutta High Court in case of LTW Industries, which specifically brings out all the parameters कि जहां पे भी fake invoicing वाला issue है, उसके रिस्पेक्ट में क्या पैरामीटर्स है जो डिपार्टमेंट जिस बेसिस के ऊपर दे कैन रेज द इशू. एंड देयर जस्ट बिकॉज द रजिस्ट्रेशन ऑफ सप्लायर has been cancelled retrospectively cannot be a sole basis to disallow somebody's input tax credit. So what I'm trying to say, scrutiny में they may raise this issue, but really does not matter if they raise the issue because you have a backing from the law. The thing which you have to always satisfy is कि आपने section 16 subsection 2 की जो 5 condition है, there are 5 conditions now, you have complied with those 5 conditions or not. Next thing to understand, जहाँ पे probably state side के लोगों का थोड़ा सा problem है, and the problem is that they know that they have to do a scrutiny, but scrutiny से order का जो process है, that's a very quick process. They probably somehow they miss the concept of DRC-01, which is a show cause notice. And we have a Supreme Court judgment in case of Ballarpur Industries, which says that show cause notice is foundation of any adjudication. तो अगर विभाग को कोई टैक्स कलेक्ट करके एक मेरे अगेंस्ट में ऑर्डर पारित करके मुझसे पैसा रिकवर करना है, विभाग को ये चीज ऑन रिकॉर्ड लेके आनी पड़ेगी कि उन्होंने मुझे मौका दिया था मेरी बात कहने के लिए. ASMT 10 में जो उन्होंने मौका दिया, उसके बावजूद उनको मुझे शो कॉज नोटिस जारी करना मैंडेटरी है, कंपलसरी है. कोई भी ऑर्डर जो DRC 07 के तहत पास हुआ है और उसके साथ मेरे को शो कॉज नोटिस नहीं दिया गया, या दिया गया तो मुझे सुनवाई का अवसर नहीं दिया गया, या मेरे रिप्लाई को ऑन रिकॉर्ड नहीं लिया गया, वो डिमांड जो है दैट इज एन इनकरेक्ट डिमांड. चाहे वो मेरिट पे डिमांड कितनी सही क्यों नहीं हो, कानूनन वो डिमांड इनकरेक्ट है. एंड दैट इज वेयर वी हैव टू बी विजिलेंट. असेसमेंट का नोटिस आना इज ओनली द इनिशिएशन ऑफ एन इंक्वायरी, दैट इज नॉट एन एंड इन इटसेल्फ. इन दिस रिगार्ड जो मोस्ट जनरल नोटिस है जो ASMT 10 के अंदर है, दैट इज 2A 3B mismatch. I'm sure all of you know this, you have heard it from other speakers also, you have also read it also, but department does not understand this. That is, ये जो 2A 3B की मैचिंग है, इसके 4 अलग अलग टाइम जोन्स हैं, और वो टाइम जोन जो पहला वाला है जुलाई 17 से लेके 8/9/2019 तक, वहां पे कोई प्रोविजन नहीं था 2A 3B मैचिंग का. वहां तक के जितने भी नोटिस ये बोलता है आपके 2A 3B में मिसमैच है, इट कांट बी बेसिस टू डिसअलाउ योर इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट. From 2019 to December 2021, when we had this matching of 120%, 120%, 105%, there also matching has to be on a cumulative basis, but not on invoice to invoice basis. From January 2022, yes, 2B is important and matching has to be on invoice to invoice basis. Business Finance Act 2022 आगे आ जाएगा, तब हम तब बात करेंगे. Probably this is not the right time to talk about it. तो 3 टाइम जोन है. स्क्रूटनी के नोटिस को टाइम जोन का ध्यान रखना जरूरी है और नोटिस उसी बेसिस के ऊपर इशू करना जरूरी है. One more important concept which is there, 2A 3B का शो कॉज नोटिस कैनॉट बी इशूड इन सेक्शन 74. डिपार्टमेंट ये नहीं कह सकता कि आपके 2A 3B में मिसमैच है और ये इंफॉर्मेशन आपने हमसे जानबूझ के छुपाई या हमें नहीं बताई, तो हम आपके ऊपर सप्रेशन या फ्रॉड या विलफुल मिसस्टेटमेंट का केस करना चाहते हैं. There is a Jharkhand High Court judgment in respect of NKS Services Private Limited, which clearly talks about it, which says that for 2A 3B mismatch, it cannot be a case of willful suppression because all the relevant information for every point of time was available with the department in this regard. There is one issue which is there under penalty under section 122, और ये department ने recently raise करना issue करा है, and it's a very funny issue, but इसका implication थोड़ा huge है. Now, initial period of GST के अंदर, because of portal issues, because of lack of understanding, because of lot of other things, people have delayed in filing their GST returns. Concept was very simple. GST का return गलत file करने से better है थोड़ा late file कर दो. And in some cases, it has gone beyond 3 months. तो 3 महीने के beyond जाके भी लोगों ने अपना GST return दाखिल किया है. Now, जब department audit कर रहा है या department जब investigation कर रहा है, सडनली उनको किसी ने सेक्शन 122 सबसेक्शन 1 क्लॉज 3 पढ़ाया. What 122(1)(3) which is regarding penalty says, it says where a taxable person who collects any tax and any amount as tax but fails to pay the same to the government beyond a period of 3 months from the date on which such payment becomes due, then he is liable to pay the penalty equivalent to the amount of tax or 10,000 rupees, whichever is higher. And now what department is saying? डिपार्टमेंट कह रहा है ये जीएसटी या 3B फाइल करने की ड्यू डेट या आपके एक्चुअल जीएसटी या 3B आपने जो फाइल करी, दोनों में 3 महीने से ज्यादा का गैप है और हम आपसे पेनल्टी मांगना चाहते हैं 122(1)(3) के हिसाब से. और 122(1)(3) कहता है जितने का टैक्स है उतने की पेनल्टी आप हमें पे कर दीजिए. दैट्स हाउ दे आर इशूइंग द शो कॉज नोटिसेस. इन माय हम्बल अंडरस्टैंडिंग, ऑल द शो कॉज नोटिस आर इनकरेक्ट, इनवैलिड. Why are they invalid? 2-3 things. What is the meaning of tax collected? They don't put that in a show cause notice. In fact, we have a Supreme Court judgment in case of Eicher Motors. What does Eicher Motors says? Eicher Motors says the amount of input tax credit which I paid to my supplier, जितना मैं पीछे मेरे supplier को ITC पे करके आया हूँ, it is as good a tax which I paid to the government. तो अगर मेरे पास इलेक्ट्रॉनिक क्रेडिट लेजर में उतने रुपए का बैलेंस पड़ा है, that means I paid that tax to the government. If that has happened, 122(1)(3) is not applicable at all. Second, अगर ऐसा कोई केस भी नहीं है, क्या डिपार्टमेंट के आइडेंटिफाई करने से पहले मैं रिटर्न दाखिल कर चुका था? अगर जवाब है हाँ, कि डिपार्टमेंट ने जब आइडेंटिफाई करा उससे पहले ऑलरेडी मेरा 3B फाइल है, चाहे डिलेड ही फाइल क्यों नहीं हो, was there an offense on which it was said that there is an offense? क्या वो ऑफेंस एक कंटिन्यूइंग ऑफेंस था या फिर एक एरर था जिस एरर की मैं ऑलरेडी कंप्लायंस कर चुका था? The answer is the provisions of 122 can be invoked only in those cases where department is able to find out an offense where there is evasion of tax. जब सरकार को ऑलरेडी टैक्स मिल चुका है, डिपार्टमेंट कैनॉट टेल मी टू पे द पेनल्टी ऑन द अमाउंट ऑफ टैक्स व्हिच हैव ऑलरेडी कॉम्पनसेटेड टू द गवर्नमेंट अलोंग विद द इंटरेस्ट. एंड दैट इज व्हाई ऑल द शो कॉज नोटिसेस व्हिच सेज आपने अपना जीएसटी रिटर्न 3 महीने बाद जो दाखिल किया है, उस कारण से आपको सेक्शन 122(1)(3) में पेनल्टी पे करने की जरूरत है. देयर आर इनकरेक्ट शो कॉज नोटिसेस that do not follow the basic principle. The basic principle is when department is booking an offense, that offense should be a continuing offense, that offense should exist on the day on which basically when they are talking about it. Okay. I think I will not take the general issue. I would just put in, there are general issues I would not go into detail. I will, I think, take this last issue, which is, yeah, this pre-deposit. This is that one area probably which there should be some caution. We have a Odisha High Court judgment in case of Jyoti Construction. The judgment says कि if you want to basically file an appeal against any order, तो कानून कहता है section 107 में that you have to pay a pre-deposit, and that pre-deposit has to be 10% of the disputed tax. Now, how that pre-deposit needs to be paid is interesting. And in some case, somebody paid pre-deposit to electronic credit ledger. The appellate authority said, no, that's not the proper payment of pre-deposit. And because your appeal is not supported by the pre-deposit, hence we will not allow it. It is a time-barred appeal, and hence we will not entertain the appeal. Assessee went to the High Court and he said, pre-deposit, चाहे मैं cash ledger से भरूं या credit ledger से भरूं, it hardly matters. I have paid pre-deposit to the government. Now, High Court in this case said, when we look at the provision of section 49, which talks about the manner of utilization of electronic credit ledger, it clearly says credit ledger से जो पैसा निकल सकता है वो सिर्फ आउटपुट टैक्स पे करने के लिए निकल सकता है, और आउटपुट टैक्स को सरकार ने कानून में डिफाइन करा हुआ है टैक्स ऑन सप्लाईज. बिकॉज आप जो प्री डिपॉजिट सरकार को जमा करा रहे हैं वो टैक्स ऑन सप्लाईज नहीं है, ये तो सरकार के पास एक डिपॉजिट के तौर पे पैसा है. यू कांट यूज इलेक्ट्रॉनिक क्रेडिट लेजर फॉर दैट, एंड हेंस द अपीलेट अथॉरिटी ने जो बोला कि आपको कैश लेजर में प्री डिपॉजिट पे करने की जरूरत है, दैट्स द राइट अप्रोच. नाउ वेदर दैट्स द राइट डिसीजन और रॉन्ग, probably I would not go into it right now, but one thing which I will say from my professional experience is it makes no sense to litigate a one more case to go to the high court कि मेरा प्री डिपॉजिट जो मैंने क्रेडिट लेजर से जमा कराया वो सही है इसलिए मेरी अपील एंटरटेन होनी चाहिए. It makes no sense, specifically when there is a high court judgment which is against that. Probably at some point of time government will realize this. ये सेम इशू पहले एक्साइज के अंदर था जहां पे बाद में अमेंडमेंट आया और उन्होंने सेनवैट क्रेडिट के थ्रू प्री डिपॉजिट पे करना अलाउ करा. Till the time there is no amendment, I would always advise, or at least I would always tell my clients that always pay pre-deposit through cash rather than going into issues that you pay through credit ledger and then argue whether that is proper or not. So that is one thing probably where we should be conservative rather than going and contesting the matter that how should pre-deposit be used. I think with this, probably some 6, 7, 10 issues which I could think of, which have generated over the last few months, are important, on which probably we should be able to take a call. How high courts are looking at the matter, how Supreme Court is looking at the matter, how can we interpret the provisions, where are the value addition possible. I have tried to encompass that. I would again like to thank CIRC for giving me this wonderful opportunity. In case there are any questions, I'll be very happy to take those questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yash bhai. Thank you. The session was, as always, the most knowledgeable ones. And it is always a pleasure listening to you. There are some questions as well, and there is some persistent demand which I have seen in every seminar, particularly your seminar, that please kindly share the PPT to the members.
Yeah,
right?
I'll share that.
So there is one question. In the case of export of goods without payment of IGST through LUT, can ITC relevant to such zero-rated supply be used for other domestic output tax liability?
No. So rule 89 sub-rule 4 talks about a specific formula. Formula said net ITC. Net ITC means ITC in that GSTR 3B. So it doesn't, you do not have to put a one-to-one correlation. And whatever ITC there in that particular month, you can claim the credit depending upon what is the proportion of the export turnover to total turnover.
Sir, I believe the question speaks about like, in the case of export of goods without payment of IGST through LUT, can ITC relevant to such zero-rated supply be used for settling other domestic
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. There is no problem, sir. Because 49 कहता है कि आपकी इलेक्ट्रॉनिक क्रेडिट लेजर में जैसी ITC है आ गई एक बार, उससे आप आउटपुट टैक्स कोई भी आउटपुट टैक्स पे कर सकते हैं, तो कोई 1-to-1 कोरिलेशन नहीं चाहिए, आप आराम से इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं.
Probably you were telling about whether it can be taken as a refund or not.
Yeah.
Right. There is one more question, sir. Whether the supplies to railway would be covered under the ambit of 12% or 18%?
It will be covered under 12%.
12%, right. Okay. Another question. There are cases where ITC is different in various reports on GST portal. That is ITC as per 2A, ITC as per comparative statement, ITC as per table 8 of GSTR 9, and ITC as per notice that is received from department. Which amount is to be considered? In certain cases, the department says they cannot go beyond 8A of GSTR 9, whereas in certain cases, the department by themselves are having certain amount which is less than 8A of GSTR 9. Your views, please.
Yeah, so answer is very simple. When you're doing a monthly compliance, from January 2022, you have to consider GSTR 2B. Before that, you have to consider GSTR 2A. Whenever a notice comes, department may take number from anywhere. You should always ask for the invoice-wise detail of it. Before January 2022, you should tell them Rule 36.4 says I have to do matching as per 2A. After January 22, I have to do matching as per GSTR 2B. If they can give me details of 2A or 2B properly, I will be able to give an answer to that. If let's say you raise this preliminary objection and they don't give you the answer, or they are unable to give the details to you, give a subsequent reply by saying कि मैं आपको मेरा 2A या मेरे 2B के साथ जो reconciliation है, जो मेरे को मेरे portal पे दिखता है, I can give it to you, and on that basis you may proceed further. That probably would be the correct answer on the practical front and also on the law front.
Okay, great. Next question. If we find some mistakes in claiming ITC, can we reverse the ITC after receipt of DRC-01 or intimation of liability under section 73? There is sufficient credit in electronic credit ledger throughout the period.
Yeah, so that's not a problem.
And there will not be any interest liability as well.
Yeah, yeah, because provision is clearly not. There is a problem currently in 50 subsection 3, but there is going to be retrospective amendment. That is already part of Finance Act 22. Moment Finance Act, the provisions of GST shall be notified. It is going to be retrospective amendment from July 22. So no interest liability.
Next question. In GSTR1, due to clerical mistake, additional sales is declared. But while filing GSTR3B and GSTR9, it has been correctly filed. Notice is being received. Any case law or circular to give reply?
There is a ulta case law against you. That is Madhya Pradesh High Court, Kabir Reality. Kabir Reality says whatever you declare in your GSTR1 becomes your self-assessed tax. And the provision for self-assessed tax is you have to first pay the tax and then claim a refund or whatever if it is a wrong tax. Then there is an amendment in section 75 subsection 12 which talks about कि आपके सेल्फ असेस टैक्स की डायरेक्ट रिकवरी हो सकती है बिना कोई नोटिस दिए हुए, और उसमें एक्सप्लेनेशन ऐड करके उन्होंने बोला जो आप GST-1 में लिख रहे हो आपका सेल्फ असेस टैक्स माना जाएगा. उसके बाद फरवरी 2022 के अंदर, जनवरी 2022 के अंदर उसके लिए एक इंस्ट्रक्शन है कि डिपार्टमेंट रिकवरी कैसे करेगा. सो टू आंसर टू दैट, लॉ थोड़ा नेगेटिव है. The only possible way to come out of this is moment you realize that there is some kind of error in this regard, you should go to a jurisdictional officer, write a letter to him, explain this to him that these figures are incorrect figures. We are going to correct that in the next GSTR1 if that is possible. If there is no possibility in this regard, probably you have to just hope that notice comes to you and there is no direct recovery. But circular or law, आपके judgment अभी फिलहाल हमारे against में.
Sir, next question. For 1718 notices, they are asking for section 16(2)(c) instead of GSTR 2A. How can we counter this, sir?
You can very easily counter that, sir. You tell me, was it possible for you to identify which supplier has paid tax and who has not paid tax? In fact, government themselves cannot do that. So there is a legal maxim which says what a reasonable common man with common intellect can't do, then you can't expect that from a taxpayer to be done. You have a judgment in VAT regime in respect of Arise India, which clearly says that whatever supplier default is there, you can't penalize the recipient in that regard. Then LGW industry judgment is also good judgment which has came from a Calcutta High Court that you can use. So I think all of this as a combination of it you can put together, sir.
Even sir, DY Bethel can be used, I think.
Yeah, in fact, correct, sir. DY Bethel Madras High Court can be used.
Even Bharat Aluminium Company.
Correct. Absolutely, sir. All of them can be used. It's very simple, sir. जो चीज आप खुद नहीं कर सकते वो आप मुझसे expect नहीं कर सकते कि मैं करूँ.
Then next. When interest is not applicable, what about penalty?
For
I think any kind of demand.
Any kind of, so there is a provision under section 122. Penalty पहले तो कोई भी लगेगी तो 122 में instances हैं उसके ऊपर है. जैसे 122(2)(b) है, अगर किसी ने 73-74 में आपको शो कॉज नोटिस दिया है, शॉर्ट पेमेंट ऑफ टैक्स, एरनियस रिफंड और रॉन्ग अवेलमेंट ऑफ आईटीसी का, देयर इज पेनल्टी अंडर 122(2)(a एंड 2)(b) जो कहते हैं इक्विवेलेंट अमाउंट ऑफ टैक्स की पेनल्टी लग सकती है. सो देयर इज अ प्रोविजन. बट 73-74 में अपने आप में एक प्रोविजन है, वो कहता है अगर आप शो कॉज नोटिस से पहले या शो कॉज नोटिस के स्पेसिफिक टाइम लिमिट के अंदर टैक्स पे करते हैं, क्योंकि आपके केस में इंटरेस्ट नहीं है, तो पेनल्टी वेव हो जाती है उस केस के अंदर. So I think you may refer to that. If you have already paid the tax, probably there would not be any penalty provisions.
Then next question: can RCM on import of services paid after DGCI visit through DRC-03 Challan in Jan 2022 relating to financial year 18-19 be availed in Jan 2022 in GSTR 3B?
Two issues under which section you have paid it, that is important. If you paid under 74(5), there is a specific restriction under section 17 subsection 5. It says it's a block credit. If let's say you were wise enough and have not done that and DGGST is not contesting it. Second, whether it is covered by the time bar of section 16 subsection 4. there is a good case to argue that it is not covered by the time bar of 16 subsection 4, because it talks about the invoice issued and debit note, and the way you read it, it talks about from a supplier's perspective. And because you take credit on the basis of self invoice under 13(3)(f), that's why you should be able to claim the credit. It's a litigative thing, but because it is your own amount which you are paying and not under 74, you should claim the credit and contest the matter with department.
Perfect, sir. Perfect. One more question. Can RCM on import of, this is done. E-way bill not raised for a few outward supplies. Is every document liable for maximum penalty of tax amount?
No. Absolutely no, sir. Absolutely no, sir. E-way bill is only for the purpose of transit. Once that transit is completed, there cannot be any penalty. Department can send a 122 liable for penalty for improper movement, but वहाँ पे because tax evasion नहीं है, तो वो 10,000 की penalty propose कर सकते हैं. उसको भी आप 126 में ले जाके कह सकते हैं कि it's a minor breach, क्योंकि इसमें tax involved 0 है, इसलिए penalty 0 होनी चाहिए.
Yes, sir. Next question. Notice for financial year 17-18 are received for mismatch in ITC as per GSTR 2A and 3B. However, since GSTR 2A was available only from October 2019, whether such notices are valid?
Yeah, they are absolutely invalid notices, but I think department has now started taking care of it. वो सिर्फ 2A 3B नहीं लिखता, वो कहते हैं चूंकि 2A 3B में mismatch है, we understand you have not complied with section 16(2)(c). So उस नोटिस को वहां जस्टिफाई करने की कोशिश करते हैं, बट आई थिंक 16(2)(c) का आंसर हम ऑलरेडी पहले दे चुके हैं कि टिल द टाइम मैकेनिज्म इज नॉट इन प्लेस यू कांट एक्सपेक्ट अस टू कंप्लाई विद इट. तो चाहे वो 16(2)(c) का रेफरेंस लिखे या नहीं लिखे, दोनों केस में नोटिस इज नॉट प्रॉपर, सर.
The next question, sir. Do you have any option to check e-invoice applicability for multiple vendors or suppliers?
Two things. Every fortnightly, if I'm not wrong, NIC issues a list of all those people who are basically issuing the e-invoicing, and that's an Excel list. So if you have list of your suppliers in Excel, you may compare it. You will be able to identify आपके कितने supplier ऐसे हैं जिन्होंने e-invoicing issue करी है. अब उसके अलावा जो बच गए, जिनके ऊपर you have an understanding that probably he might be required to do e-invoicing. There, unfortunately, I am not aware about any software, but on GST portal, you can go put a GST detail and you'll be able to find out what is his turnover range for previous periods. And on that basis, you may be able to understand that. One advice again, which I give my clients is there is a standard, maybe one declaration as a recipient, which you can give to all your suppliers and tell them that you sign this. And even if you don't sign this, receipt of it shall be treated as if you agree to it. कि अगर कल को अगर आपने IRN generate नहीं करा और मुझे credit नहीं मिलता है, you will compensate for that. So maybe that is one thing which one can take care of.
One more question, sir. Where can we use revenue neutrality to the maximum for the benefits of client?
Penalty. अगर आप पेनल्टी का कोई मैटर कंटेस्ट कर रहे हो, डिपार्टमेंट आप पे पेनल्टी लगा रहा है और आप रेवेन्यू न्यूट्रलिटी प्रूव कर सकते हैं, आप पेनल्टी से सेफगार्ड हो सकते हैं. टैक्स और इंटरेस्ट से आपको इसमें सेफगार्ड नहीं मिलेगा.
At least we can contest this in the case of RCM, sir.
No, in case of RCM also. That is my personal understanding, because if that being the case, everybody will say I will not pay because I am entitled for input tax credit, and then the whole system of value-added tax would collapse. And there are judgments from tribunal also, in fact high court also. They say penalty में हमको समझ में आता है कि आपको पे करके लेना था, इसलिए आपने बोनाफाइड पे नहीं करा. अगर टाइम लिमिट के अंदर टैक्स है रिकवर करा जा सकता है, टाइम लिमिट के बियॉन्ड है तो टैक्स रिकवर नहीं किया जा सकता.
Okay. The next question. Notice against earlier block credit now unblocked with interest and penalties.
Yeah, it's a regular notice. Regular DRC-01, contest the matter. They will issue a DRC-7. If it is against you, file an appeal.
Sir, one more point. Basically, whenever they are issuing DRC-01, then there is a regular practice of not issuing DRC-01A. So how to contest that?
So unfortunately, sir, from 2019 October, issuance of DRC-01A has been made optional. It is not mandatory. Earlier, the word used was shall. Sorry, from 2020. So earlier, the word used was shall. In 2020, it was changed to may. So department may give you DRC-01A. The practice should be whenever you receive any notice, any summon, any scrutiny, always write one line that you want a pre-show cause hearing before issuing a show cause notice. Then if they don't want to issue a DRC-01, they have to put this on your file. And अगर अब वो आपको DRC-1A नहीं देते, तब आप इसको जरूर ग्राउंड बना सकते हैं कि हमने रिक्वेस्ट किया था, आपने नहीं दिया और आपने हमें रीजन नहीं दिया. But otherwise, now department is not mandated by rules to give you DRC-1A every time.
Okay. The next question. Whether ITC to be reversed on writing of the slow moving items in the books, even though same has been sold as scrap later on.
No, I already explained. Till the time you're not getting physically rid of those goods, you are not required to reverse anything, even if you make a provision in books of account.
Correct. Then security services availed from firm, he has charged GST and company has paid without noticing that it was under RCM. How should we make payment under RCM?
अगर आपको कंजर्वेटिव तौर पे कंप्लायंस करनी है, आरसीएम पे करिए, उसको बोलिए कि वो रिफंड क्लेम करेगा, आप अपना आईटीसी रिवर्स करिए, दोनों केस में इंटरेस्ट का इंप्लीकेशन है. Second is, because you have already paid the tax, there are a lot of judgments in this regard which say because tax has already reached to the government, it was under a bona fide belief. In this case, we will allow the supplier, the recipient, not to pay the tax again. तो यहाँ पर आप यूज कर सकते हैं सर्विस टैक्स में. आपको जीटीए के कॉन्सेप्ट, आई थिंक बिल्ला रेडी मिक्स इज वन जजमेंट, जहां पर आपको ये इसके रिस्पेक्ट में यू विल बी एबल टू फाइंड द फेवरेबल जजमेंट. तो यहाँ पर आई वुड टेक अ कॉल कि आप थोड़ा अग्रेसिव हो सकते हैं. यू कैन डिसाइड नॉट टू पे द टैक्स सब्जेक्ट टू यू प्रूव टू द गवर्नमेंट दैट सप्लायर हैज पेड द टैक्स प्रॉपर्ली.
Sir, one more question. A client has not generated self-generated invoices for claiming ITC of RCM paid by him. Whether penalty provision shall be for each default? I think this is repeat question.
Practically, it should be for only once, because it's a default of one type which has happened continuously. You have not done the default every time. It is one slippage of compliance, and because it has continued, because every time a transaction is to be taken. Department may do it on every transaction, but legally it will sustain only once.
Sir, I believe all the questions have been resolved from your side. There were initially some raised hands, but I think all the queries have been resolved. One more question.
Yeah.
One more question. Section 17.5 restricts ITC on goods sold for free. Is it applicable only for goods? Can input on goods be availed for services rendered for free?
Good question, but the manner in which 17.5 is written, it specifically talks about one-to-one correlation. So if those goods which I have given for, if I have given those goods on which claimed ITC, they are given for free, then only ITC reversal should be there. If I use certain goods to give free services, 17.5 does not envisage that situation, because it talks about reversal of input tax rate in respect of. And then all of us know there is a Supreme Court judgment of Swastik Tobacco which says in respect of should be read very narrowly, and it is a synonym of on. So it's like input tax rate on those goods which are lost, stolen, destroyed, returned, or given as free sample. So answer from my side to this will be, my understanding is no ITC reversal is required.
Sir, to avoid any kind of ITC reversal, should we charge a nominal amount also? Can there be a planning in that sense?
That can be done, but उसमें एक बस problem है कि if tomorrow department will say आपने इसको supply बना दिया और हम इसको price पेड और पेबल को ट्रांजैक्शन वैल्यू नहीं मानते, सोल्ड कंसिडरेशन नहीं मानते, तो हम इसको वैल्यूएशन रूल्स में ले जाएंगे. तो वो एक रिस्क है. अगर वो अवॉइड हो सकता है रिस्क, तो इट्स ऑब्वियसली इट्स अ वेरी प्रैक्टिकल एंड अ वेरी सिंपल एडवाइस टू गिव टू द क्लाइंट.
Sir, what I mean to convey is it can be raised only and only by the department in case the parties are related to each other. I feel so.
No. So you know there is a judgment of Fiat India in Central Excise. किसी ने कॉस्ट के नीचे गाड़ी बेची थी पूनो कार को, डिपार्टमेंट ने बोला कि आपने गाड़ी इसलिए सस्ते में बेची क्योंकि आपको और मार्केट कैप्चर करना, इसलिए प्राइस इज नॉट द सोल कंसिडरेशन, और इसलिए और सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने उसको अपहेल्ड किया था. और उसके बाद सेंट्रल एक्साइज में अमेंडमेंट आया था, वो अमेंडमेंट इधर जीएसटी में नहीं है, मतलब वो वैसा कोई क्लॉज जीएसटी में नहीं, सो वहां पे प्रॉब्लम है.
मतलब आई थिंक सर क्वेश्चन स्टिल रिमेन्स, क्योंकि वैट में, राजस्थान वैट में, चाहे एमपी वैट एक्ट में तो ऐसा था कि आप यू कैन नॉट सेल योर गुड्स बिलो कॉस्ट प्राइस.
बिलो कॉस्ट प्राइस, करेक्ट.
No, but there is no such clause in GST.
No, I agree. So what I'm trying to say is, अगर आप प्रूव कर सकते हो कि इसके अलावा मेरा और कोई कंसिडरेशन नहीं था, या डिपार्टमेंट इसके अगेंस्ट में कॉन्ट्ररी एविडेंस लेके नहीं आ सकता, तब तो आप जो कह रहे हो वो एडवाइस 100% एब्सोल्युटली स्पॉट ऑन, कोई झगड़ा ही नहीं है. पर अगर डिपार्टमेंट कॉन्ट्ररी एविडेंस लेके आ सकता है, तो जनरली वो डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर के केस में लेके आता है कि आपने इस प्राइस पे इसलिए बेचा क्योंकि आप चाहते थे कि आपका मार्केट कैप्चर हो आगे जाके, और आपने ये सैंपल था और आपने सैंपल को नॉमिनल प्राइस पे इसलिए क्योंकि आप जीएसटी अवेल करना चाहते थे. ऑल दोस प्रॉब्लम्स में क्रिएट
लिंकिंग इट टू 15(3)B.
हाँ करेक्ट सर, करेक्ट। नहीं, वो 15 से ही बाहर ले जाएंगे। वो बोलेंगे प्राइस पेड और पेबल इज नॉट द सोल कंसिडरेशन। पार्टीज रिलेटेड है या नहीं वो अलग बात है, सोल कंसिडरेशन नहीं है।
Sir, one more question. Whether ITC to be reversed on provision of slow moving material in the books?
No.
This has been
I am
already.
not answered.
So I think all the queries have been resolved, sir. It was so nice of you to have you on our platform of CRC, and we would be always obliged by your presence, sir. And we expect that you are always there to solve the queries of all the members of CIRC and even other regions, sir.
No, the CIRC is
So on
blessed to
behalf
have
of
you
all
as a regional council member, sir, who understands GST as good as jitna I understand, sir.
Are sir, please.
मैं सर ये कह रहा था
Rajiv ji. Rajiv sir.
यस सर
कैसे आ रहे हैं? जल्दी पहुंचाओ मैं अभी
अंकित जी कुछ कह रहे हैं आप?
हाँ सर, हाँ बस I would like to invite Rajiv ji for vote of thanks, please.
उन्होंने क्या कहा
सर
नीचे जो बनी हुई थी बिल्डिंग
थैंक यू अंकित भाई।
किसी से कोई ड्राफ्टमैन वगैरह
देखिए यश जी ने, मैंने बीच में 15-20 मिनट नहीं सुना, लेकिन मैंने बाकी सारा सर का जो डेलिब्रेशन है पूरे ध्यान से सुना है। और जो सर ने एक बहुत अच्छी बात बताई जो आजकल नोटिस डिपार्टमेंट दे रहे हैं, और रिगार्डिंग की वो 17-18 का मिसमैचिंग भी जो दे रहे हैं 3P वर्सेस का, तो वो सभी जगह आ रहा है। मुझे लगता है डिपार्टमेंट को बहुत इजी टास्क लग रहा है कि मिसमैचिंग हो रही है तो एक नोटिस तो इशू कर ही दो। वेदर द रेलेवेंट पीरियड उस समय हमारे पास डाटा था कंपेयर का नहीं था, तो सर मुझे लगता है बहुत आपने बहुत बढ़िया तरीके से अपना डेलिब्रेशन दिया और यकीनन सभी मेंबर्स को उसका फायदा मिला होगा। जीएसटी एक ऐसी चीज होती जा रही है, जितना भी हम पढ़ते जाते हैं उतना लगता है और ज्यादा सीखने की जरूरत है। तो आप जैसा मार्गदर्शन हमें मिलता रहे पूरे सीआरसी को, और अंकित जी हमारे बहुत डायनेमिक पर्सनैलिटी और बढ़िया तरीके से वो प्रोग्राम कंडक्ट करवाते रहते हैं, और खुद भी जीएसटी के स्पीकर हैं, तो इससे अच्छी तो कोई बात ही नहीं हो सकती कि दोनों स्पीकर जीएसटी के हैं। तो हम तो बैंक ऑडिट्स पे थोड़ा बहुत बोलने वाले लोग हैं, सीजनल वाले, लेकिन जीएसटी एवरग्रीन है। सर आपने बहुत बढ़िया तरीके से अपना दिया, उसके लिए सीआरसी की तरफ से, पूरी हमारी टीम की तरफ से आपका पूरा धन्यवाद। और साथ ही साथ मैं अंकित जी का भी धन्यवाद करना चाहूंगा, अपने आज के मॉडरेटर और हमारे कोलीग, साथ में हमारे आरसीएम अंकित भाई। थैंक यू वेरी मच। आप कंक्लूड कीजिए।
चलिए, थैंक यू यश जी, थैंक यू फॉर सच अ नाइस सेलिब्रेशन।
और सभी मेंबर्स का भी, पार्टिसिपेंट का भी, जो अभी तक भी हमारे साथ रुके हुए रहे और लास्ट तक भी उन्होंने क्वेश्चन आंसर में भी इंटरेस्ट दिखाया। तो कई बार अपनी प्रॉब्लम नहीं होती, लेकिन दूसरी प्रॉब्लम समझ के आता कि हाँ ये इस तरीके का तो इशू हमारे साथ भी था। तो बहुत बढ़िया तरीके से सबने सुना, तो सभी मेंबर्स का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
थैंक यू सर,
थैंक यू सर।
थैंक यू खान जी, थैंक यू सीआरसी टीम हमारी जो बैकएंड पे वर्क करती रहती है लगातार। थैंक यू खान भाई।
थैंक यू सर।